Hello everybody. I'm doing sort of a final review video for this set, at least when it comes to reviewing individual cards. And today we're going to be going over the rares and mythics of Modern Masters 3. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about drafting strategy and in particular signaling with this set, because Modern Masters sets and all these sort of more powerful limited formats, they want you to pursue a somewhat different draft strategy in regards to sort of finding the open lane, being flexible in your picks, and things of that sort. Because in many other draft environments, if you spend your first, say, 6 picks just kind of speculating on something that doesn't work out, you can be in a lot of trouble later on, simply because there are a lot of commons and uncommons in those sets that really aren't very playable, that you're not going to want to see in your deck at all. Just vanilla 2/1s for 2, things of this sort might have to end up in your deck if you can't get there with your first few picks. Whereas in a set like this, because the list of playables is so much larger, you really can afford to waste some picks on something, right, and still have a deck that's going to be very playable at the end. And if that wasting of picks allows you to be more flexible in what you pick up later, or allows you to kind of find whatever the open lane is at the table, then you can end up with a much stronger deck. Even if you ended up wasting those 6 picks, if it kept you open and let you gave you the time to find the right strategy, then that's going to be very good. And one of the things that's also very different about formats like these is that a lot of times you're trying to draft not just strong cards, but a certain archetype in a very big way. That if you just sort of draft good cards, right, good stuff, you might not get there. A lot of these sets are built around synergies, and there are some good stuff cards in this deck. But I really want to emphasize that they have you kind of pegged in at doing a certain thing in each of these colors, and trying to diverge from that thing is probably not going to be rewarded very highly. You're going to have to spend a lot of picks on fixing and things of this sort, but then you might not find all the benefits that you're looking for later. I really think in particular you shouldn't be trying to draft, say, a wedge, a Khan's wedge. Drafting a Lara shard is great, that's fine. But then even within those color choices that you make, you want to be focusing on what exactly your deck does and finding the synergies for it. Cards like Intangible Virtue are very, very strong in the right deck and useless in many other decks. And as a consequence of that, reading the signals at the table and kind of seeing what the open lane is going to be very important. And it's also going to be important to look at signals not just in terms of what colors are open, but also in terms of what archetypes are open. If you're seeing good cards for a populate theme come around, right, then you might say, okay, well, even though I'm not seeing other cards in that color belonging to those other themes, the populate theme is open, right? You might say, okay, a lot of these blue-black instant speed control, these black sacrifice strategies, like these cards are going around, that archetype is open, even if the other stuff is being taken, right? And so it's a little bit less about specific colors and finding which colors are open, which is kind of more the case in something like Gate Crash, where it's literally, here are the 5 guilds, find which one isn't being drafted. Here you're focused really on those archetypes, and it's nice that they give you the sort of that flexibility between being 2 colors, 3 colors, and how they kind of meld together. But you do want to be focusing on synergies, and as a consequence, the signaling is very important. And that leads into the next point, which is that there's a lot of high money cards in this set, and I've put all the rares and mythics here. And anytime you see 2, right, that means that this card is worth some amount of money on Magic Online. I think I set the limit at basically 2 ticks, which is kind of the point where I would be considering just drafting it for the money's sake. Kind of the same way where about 1 ticket is where I'm thinking in a regular draft, where I'm considering, right, and it kind of depends on the circumstances. But there are a lot of money cards in this set, which means the signaling is going to be really messed up a lot of the time, because people are going to draft Liliana the Veil, pack 3, pick 1, even if they have no black cards, right? Because she alone just wins them the draft in terms of how much money they get, being able to sell her afterwards, right? There's virtually no pick that I would take over Liliana the Veil at any point in any part of the draft, simply because EV-wise, right, gaining that value is a really big deal. And as I said before in sort of my first video, I'm a guy who really really cares about sort of growing my collection online, and I'm a free-to-play player, and some people, yeah, I guess they like drafting where they don't consider EV, and they take whatever the best card is for their deck. I'm not that way, and I'm in particular very proud that I kept this up here in the corner. Very proud. When I gave my first video, I had something like 180 tickets, and then I've been doing a lot of drafts of Eldritch Moon, Shadows over Innistrad, and last night had some really good luck. Opened Liliana the Last Hope twice, and that was huge. So I'm now over 2,000, which I'm very proud of. But I did it through drafting money cards and not just passing Liliana's the Veil. And I have to expect that a lot of people out there are like me. They don't really, they kind of take pride in growing their collection on Magic Online, that they don't particularly like spending a bunch of money on Magic Online, and they're going to draft the Liliana the Veils away from you. And I'll put this away for now, but just wanted to brag a little bit. I'm really proud of it. Anyways, but a lot of people aren't going to pass you Liliana the Veil under any circumstances. And you kind of have this interesting dynamic that it's very hard to read signals, especially in the first pack, because people are going to do things like just take fetch lands, and they'll leave really powerful uncommons, commons, etc. in the pack, right? People might take a foil card, and you'll have no idea what they're going into. And it's really, really very difficult to peg them down on what exactly it is they're taking. And it's kind of interesting, too, because a lot of the money cards in the set aren't particularly strong limited cards. Things like Stony Silence, things like Blood Moon, even cards like Pyromancer Ascension, Past in Flames, Gifts Ungiven, although this is maybe a little bit stronger given the graveyard synergy and the instant speed stuff. But there are a lot of cards in the set that have good value. And I'll even kind of Abrupt Decay in there. They have good value, right? Like the fetch lands, but they're not particularly overpowered when it comes to limited, right? Fetch lands are nice fixing, and that's great, but they don't have anything besides basic lands that they're fetching, so they're not even that great at fixing. They're enemy colored, which is not really what you're interested in terms of fixing a lot of the time. I would value, for example, allied color signets over enemy colored signets, because you're much more likely to end up in a given allied color pair than you are in an enemy colored pair, basically twice as likely, right? Well, yeah, I'd say even more than twice as likely, considering that I might draft 2-color strategies a lot more often than 3-color strategies. In any case, the point being, cards like Grafdigger's Cage are just not that useful in limited, right? They might be sideboard cards, and there's a decent number of things that Grafdigger's Cage would be useful from to beat, but they're not particularly strong from a limited point of view. But you're still going to see people drafting them fairly highly, because those cards just have money value. And so you enter into this kind of weird phase where you might see a lot of really strong uncommons show up, but they wouldn't really have any indication of that color necessarily being open. You'll sometimes, even though the signaling, you read it pretty much perfectly in packs 1 and 2, you then don't get any of the color cards that you're looking for in the next pack, because people are rare drafting them away. And I think it lends itself to kind of interesting draft strategy. Here's my value calculation. I think I updated it once, so these numbers aren't perfectly accurate, but it lends itself interestingly to some draft strategy, in that if you look at which colors have the most sort of money in them, some colors are definitely a lot better than others. Mono white, 26 cents per pack. Mono blue, 26 cents per pack. But then you find things like the black cards, $1 per pack, largely owing to Liliana the Veil, right, who's more than half of that value. But Gristlebrand, Damnation, Death Shadow, a lot of these cards are here. Inquisition of Kozilek is one of the uncommons that also still has a lot of value online. A lot of the other ones don't. You can get Path to Exiles for like 20 cents. You can get a lot of this other stuff for pretty cheap, because it's been reprinted effectively online a lot of times through sort of other products. In red, 48 cents, but Blood Moon is almost all of that, right? 35 cents of that 48 cents is Blood Moon, which is not really something you're going to want to play. So you kind of have these interesting effects where there are money cards in the set, and you're in this awkward dilemma where either you try and bias yourself towards drafting those colors. That way, if you do open one of those cards, you'll be able to play it, which is relevant in some colors where Liliana of the Veil is, definitely a very playable card, and a little bit less relevant in other colors where, Blood Moon is not really a playable card. But you kind of have to fall into one of two strategies where you want to bias yourself a little bit towards the colors that have these big money cards, because you're going to first pick them no matter what anyways, because they're worth so much money. And you want to be able to play them if you can, right? And so if you get that pack 3 Liliana of the Veil, wouldn't it be nice if you were in black so you could play her? But then you kind of have the flip side, which is that, well, a lot of the time you're not going to get these cards, right? That people are going to be drafting them away from you. And if you want sort of the strongest deck, not necessarily the deck that would have the most money cards in it, you would want to avoid those colors, right? You want to avoid the colors with Liliana of the Veil because you're not going to get the Lilianas, right? And instead you might want to go into the colors where there are less money cards. And there's sort of a weird meta there, which is sort of how highly are people going to pick a lot of these money cards. And in any case, depending upon how you like to approach value in drafts, that's sort of for your purposes something you want to figure out on your own. But you also want to understand the motivations of other people at the table so that you can read the signals a little bit better. That's, I think, the main point that I want to make. Not, there is something to be said about crafting your own strategy when it comes to that and how you sort of bias yourself towards certain colors. I'm pretty much going to play what I think is strong more often than not which is mainly going to be blue, but I'm going to focus a little bit less on making sure I'm in the colors that have the good money cards. I'm still going to take the money cards, but I'm going to be focusing on the other stuff. And in any case, you want to be aware that a lot of the cards that you might see at Rare or Mythic are very, very unlikely to be passed to you regardless of whether or not you've read the signals correctly, right? So you have this interesting effect where there's a lot of... Reading the signals is very important because you want your decks to be synergistic. You don't want to be fighting with another guy for a certain archetype at the table. The signals are going to be very hard to read, though, because unfortunately the money drafting is going to interfere with that, at least in your first few picks of a pack. And then after that, you might not even get rewarded all that much for the signaling in some sense, because a lot of these bomb mythics, bomb rares are not going to go your way. So complex problem. I think you should be aware of it and try and read into it a little bit differently than you would a normal draft. I'll talk a little bit later about sort of what it means when you see an uncommon taken from a pack and a good rare left in the pack, what that probably indicates, because there is still some other signaling that can happen. I have another sort of slide here in a sense of the best commons and uncommons, sort of the top pickable ones, and that'll come in handy. But for now, I just wanted to do a quick review of all the rares and mythics. The general gist of all these is that they're almost all bombs, almost all really strong. Those that aren't are usually actually worth money, and so you're still going to want to draft them anyways. So spoiler alert, you don't need, if you just focus on understanding the commons and uncommons, the rares and mythics are pretty simple, as long as you understand which of them have good price tags and whatnot. And I guess it's just a question of how good is this in terms of me splashing it, taking it over a good uncommon, if it isn't one of the rares it's worth money, things of that sort. And yeah, so let me just get into the card evaluation. First up, I'm going to go over the whites, basically sorted these by colors, and I'm just going to go through them by color. Stony Silence, really the only artifacts in the set that have activated abilities, or really the only artifacts, period, if we're not counting the Splicer Golems, are the Signets and Basilisk Collar. Now, there are some activated abilities, essentially, of the Splicers that get shut down by this, right? A Splicer can't... or Splicer Golem can't regenerate itself if we're talking about Vital Splicer, things of that sort, but that's pretty minor. This card is really bad and limited, and it's also only worth, I think, 2 or 3 ticks on Magic Online right now. So it's maybe not even the thing that you want to be first picking, just as a money option, because that's sort of on the line, really, in terms of money drafting, for me at least. Given that a draft costs $25, if you get a $3 card, but you could have had some really strong uncommon, that's the point where I'd probably first pick a strong uncommon. But this is a card that probably isn't going to go that late. People are still going to be looking at this and saying, oh, well, it's a $2, $3 bill. Doesn't really have a lot of... I wouldn't even use this as a sideboard card a lot of the time, because I really don't expect... First off, it's symmetric, so my own signets get shut down. But also, it just isn't even a good sideboard card to bring in against the guy who has a bunch of signets or something. So, not a good card. Worth money, though, and this is sort of going to be almost like the standard of, do I take this over some other card, right? This is going to be the test of your card evaluation, because it's just going to be the $2 or $3 bill in the pack, and you decide whether or not you want to take a Mog Flunkies over this, right? That's going to be the decision that you're going to be faced with a lot of the time. So think about that, and how you sort of your drafting strategy, how highly you draft simple money in a set, and this is going to be a lot of what you want to think about. Blade Splicer, this card is fantastic. I mean, it is 4 power and toughness. 3 of it has first strike, which is excellent. I would just take a 3/3 first strike for 3 mana. Has blink synergies, has populate synergies, has the splicer synergies. This card is amazing. This card is very first pickable. Practically a bomb too, given that the way that the archetypes work, you're going to be able to blink this guy or populate the token or do a lot of things like that oftentimes. So this card just first pickable, beats out pretty much all the uncommons in my opinion. There's very little I'm going to take over it. Especially when we talk about monocolored cards. The monocolored cards in particular are very first pickable, especially when they only have 1 mana symbol in their mana cost, because they leave you open to doing so much. This card is just really, really solid. I don't even think it needs to be explained why. It's just, on its own, is a good creature. Combined with all the synergies that this color is trying to do, it's even more fantastic. Ranger of Eos. Ranger of Eos is a solid card. I think in paper it's worth a little bit more. In online, it's worth maybe like a ticket. It's interesting because it depends a lot upon a synergy that really isn't there in this set, which is finding these good 1-drops. In Modern, you would go and you would fetch things like Sarah Ascendant or Martyr of Sands. Here, you're probably at best fetching Gideon's Lawkeeper, and if you have Gideon's Lawkeepers, this guy becomes pretty good, right? If I play Ranger of Eos and I fetch 2 Gideon's Lawkeepers, I'm pretty happy with my turn 4 play. And that is also another thing to note in a lot of the evaluation of these cards. I'm always, because I think signets are very valuable in this set, I'm always looking for good 4-drops. This guy is a pretty solid 4-drop. If he's getting me 2 cards from my deck, I'm pretty happy about that. I like this a lot, but again, you need to find the 1-drops for this, and there aren't a lot of 1-drops in this set that are going to pay you off in a huge way. Gideon's Lawkeeper is one of the best, but even if I find something like sort of these other good 1-drops like Avacyn's Pilgrim, I'm not super excited about Avacyn's Pilgrim, because if I have 4 mana to play Ranger of Eos, the ramp effect from the Avacyn's Pilgrim is not really that good. So I think this is a card that you're not going to want to first pick a lot of the time, because you don't want to grab it until you have those 1-drops that are going to be a payoff, just simply because there aren't a lot of them in the set. And Gideon's Lawkeeper, for example, is not a card that's going to be going late, right? I would draft, if I was given the choice, I would probably draft Gideon's Lawkeeper over Ranger of Eos in a pack, right? And that's a pretty interesting point when sort of the tail is wagging the dog here. The rare is typically the thing that you're gonna build around, but this is more the in a sense a payoff card for having Gideon's Lawkeepers than the Lawkeeper is the payoff card for having Ranger of Eos, which is kind of odd. In any case, I'm not going to draft this very highly, but if I see myself pack 2, pack 3, I have the 1-drops that I like, right? Whatever they may be, Gideon's Lawkeeper being probably the best of the bunch. I'm going to like this guy a lot more, and I'm going to pick him more highly over, say, some solid uncommon. Restoration Angel, this, like Blade Splicer, is just really solid. Again, also like Blade Splicer, it's worth money. Blade Splicer is worth like $4 or $5. I think the same is true of Restoration Angel. It has, just by itself, so much good stuff going on. It's a flash 3/4 flyer for just 3 and a white. Yeah, that's really good. The fact that it blinks things when it comes in is also really fantastic. There aren't a lot of things in this format that beat 3/4 flyers. There are some 4/4 flyers in the format. Tower Gargoyles, Entreat the Angel tokens, Moroys. But a 3/4 usually in combat beats a lot of the other stuff. 2/2 is kind of one of the more common power and toughnesses for a lot of these creatures. 2/3 is really where you want to be. 3/4 beats both of them. So it isn't the biggest of bodies that you're going to find on a flyer, but it's pretty big. And certainly I think a lot of the time this is just going to eat some attacking creature. They're going to attack in with a Core Skyfisher. They're going to attack in with a 2/2 and Restoration Angel, right? It's not the sort of thing that a lot of people are going to play around because this is at rare, right? And I think it's just going to get you a lot of value. Even when you're not blinking something with this, just being able to play it at flash speed is going to be such a beating. And when you do blink something with this, especially if you're blinking, say, a Blade Splicer, when this comes into play and you're blinking a Thrag Tusk, right? That's just dirty. I mean, this card is fantastic, first pickable all the time, like Blade Splicer. Then we have Seance. Seance is not worth money, although there's one guy out there who really wishes it was. I still think it's a bomb, though, in this format. And I know that sounds weird because Seance is a little bit of a joke, but there are a lot of Enter the Battlefield things going on in white. And the colors that you're going to pair with white, like blue and green, also have a lot of Enter the Battlefield stuff going on. And if you get into Esper with this as well, it's also really strong because then there's sort of these unearthed creatures. There's ways of putting things in your graveyard. You can almost have sort of an Esper graveyard synergy once you've added black into the mix. And things like Gifts Ungiven, things like, if I just go to blue, sort of these blue mill effects like Forbidden Alchemy, right? These give you options once you have this card to just get crazy amounts of value. The first thing to note is that it's the beginning of each upkeep, your opponent's upkeep and yours as well. And so even though this creature doesn't get haste, so it isn't really an attacker, you do get the inner battlefield effect either way, and it serves as a blocker a lot of times. So Seance can help stabilize you, weirdly enough, because you can bring back creatures on your opponent's turn, and then they don't really want to attack in because they don't want to trade with a creature that's just going to go away, a token that's going to go away at the end of the turn. Interestingly enough, instant speed populate will also populate the tokens. It isn't bringing back the creature and then exiling the creature. It's bringing back a token of the creature and then exiling the card from the graveyard, right? Or really, it exiles the creature card from the graveyard first, so I'll make that clear. But in any case, I think this card is really strong. I think this card is a bomb. I think this card is not even a very hard card to build around. It can get you so much value that I really see myself first picking this a lot of the time. I think this card is really good, and it isn't worth money. So this is actually one of the cards that will get passed to you, right? If you are in this strategy, this is going to be one of those cards that makes it past, unlike Blade Splicer, unlike Restoration Angel, right? This, if the guy next to you isn't in white, he's not going to grab this, right? Not for the money, not for the splash ability, not for anything. This is very specifically for an archetype. I think it's a very strong card in that archetype. So I'm going to actually I'm going to pick one this a lot of the time and then see if I can get white going. Terminus. This card actually isn't worth that much money online. Even if I'm just playing it as a 6-mana Wrath, I think it's pretty solid. Playing it as a 1-mana Wrath can also be pretty solid. The big trick, though, of course, is what type of deck you are, right? If you are Esper Control, then this is fantastic. If you're Naya Go Wide, then this is not really useful to you at all, right? Even if you Wrath the board and you kill off 3 of your opponent's creatures, your win condition was getting there before they got there a lot of the time, and this just resets the game, and they're going to win from that reset position a lot of the time. So this is not a card I'm going to first pick a lot of the time. One, because it isn't worth money, but two, because it locks me into an archetype, and I'm not really sure it's that fantastic of a card in that archetype, right? It's nice to be able to miracle this, and especially when you're able to miracle this sort of on your opponent's turn. You can they go to attacks or something, or maybe they play some creatures to try and buff up a Bronzebeak Moa or something like this, right? They play an enchantment like Madcap Skills, and then you say, oh, well, I have a way to draw cards at instant speed, and look at this card that I scribed to the top of my library. Isn't that fantastic? Everything goes to the bottom of its owner's library. Bam. I don't know. I'm not going to be picking this very highly because it locks me into, I think, a very particular archetype, and it is a very strong effect. But again, I'm locked into that archetype, and I don't think it's necessarily the end all be all of that archetype. I don't think it's going to be sort of the value card that Seance is. I really want to be Esper, I think, when I draft this, where Seance leaves me a little bit more open, right? Terminus is a little bit more specific. I don't think it's as strong. So I'm still going to pick this once I'm in those colors, and also this is going to be a sign to me that that archetype is open, that people are not going for that sort of blue, white, black, or even just a blue, white controlling build. But I'm not going to pick this very highly. Cyclonic Rift, this is kind of the same story. I'm probably not going to overload this a lot. It is interesting, like bouncing all of my opponent's permanents is really big game, and that'll win me a lot of the games. I don't know if getting the 7 mana is really the issue here. I'm going to pick this more highly than Terminus, for sure. In particular because at 2 mana, this card is still pretty good, right? My opponent goes to put an enchantment on something, I bounce it to their hand. This is a good combat trick against an Anthem enchantment, right? Because it isn't necessarily a creature. It can be a non-land permanent I don't control. I can bounce their Anthem. All their creatures get smaller, and then I'm able to make more profitable blocks. It just kills tokens, right? So I think this is a very solid effect. I'm going to pick this more highly than Terminus, but I don't know. I still kind of wonder a little bit about this card because I think in a lot of the cases where I play it, I'm going to be playing it for 2 mana as a bounce effect, right? This is going to be a boomerang. And I think that's a solid card, but that's almost in the area where I start considering, would I rather take a really strong removal spell at uncommon, right? I'm not quite into, like, this is a card I'm going to build around because I'm not really sure how often I'm going to ramp to 7 mana. This just seems like a solid card, and I'm going to draft it pretty highly, as I would, say, a good uncommon removal spell, but there are rares that I'm going to, and mythics that I'm going to draft over this a lot of the time if I can, right? It's not that common that you're going to see competition between 2 rares. You kind of have to have something going on with your foil slot to have that to happen. But if I'm not in blue, say pack 2, and I see this going up against just a solid removal spell in my colors, this isn't worth money. I don't think it's really something that I'm that desperate to splash for, right? So I'm going to let this one go, I think, a lot of the time. But I will be picking it. If I'm not in dedicated colors, I'm going to be picking this pretty highly, just because I think for 2 mana, having a boomerang is going to be decent in this format, right? Kills tokens. There's some neat combat stuff you can do with it. It's another one of these things that blanks a lot of the really bad cards like Madcap skills, and I like that. But otherwise, I don't know. Maybe if this card had the flexibility of bouncing my own non-land permanent, right, as opposed to just non-land permanent I don't control, then it would be interesting. But I think the 7 mana thing is rarely going to happen, and this is interestingly maybe one of these things for like the blue-green ramp sub theme that's going on, but I'm not super excited. Phantasmal Image. It's difficult to evaluate this card because there are a lot of cards that will target this. So the downside, right, of this 2 mana copy is that your opponent's going to be able to target it pretty frequently. You also kind of lose some upside on your own when you can't really target it, but the main attraction, I think, of this is that if you have gotten there with the Enter the Battlefield stuff, this is 2 mana copy and Enter the Battlefield effect, and then even then, if it dies to a Vithian Stinger or dies to even just a Cyclonic Rift or any sort of blink, right? A Flicker Wisp kills this. I'm not really that upset about that, right? It works to some extent also with tokens. If I have, a lot of populate effects, then this will give me an extra token, right? Of some creature, presumably. And what that creature is, I kind of want to find those creatures. I want to find the creature that this copies before I just find populate effects and then hope that my opponent plays something worth Phantasmal Imaging. But this card is pretty solid, and I'm going to pick this pretty highly. I think it's not quite like bomb status of Restoration Angel Blade Splicer, right? But this card fits very well in the archetypes, and I think it's solid. And I'm going to pick it up a lot of the time. in particular because populate, you know, I could be blue-white, populate, things of that sort, and this would gain even more value in that case. But enter the battlefield effects, right, are also big for blue, so I think this card is strong. I'm not going to put it up with Blade Splicer Restoration Angel, but up there with like Seance, right? Cackling Counterpart. This one's really interesting. It's instant speed and only counters a creature that you control, but by the same token as Phantasmal Image, you're getting a enter the battlefield effect again, right? And you also have flashback on this. So one, having an instant speed I think is a really big deal because you're able to catch people out. Works a little bit better with the sort of the blue-black type decks, right, which are looking to play a lot of tricks at instant speed. This one is just a pretty savage trick a lot of the time. I think you'll do a lot of work against your opponent. And then being able later on in the game to get another token is pretty fantastic. So this is one that I think if Phantasmal Image skews, you know, a little bit more towards populate, right, or is more willing to work with the populate decks, this one is probably a little bit less willing to work with the populate decks because those decks are usually base green-white, right? And this has 2 blue in its mana cost, which is a little bit tricky. And this skews a little bit more towards like Esper control, maybe even just like blue-black control if you can find some decent creatures to blink, or sorry, that have enter the battlefield effects. You do need to definitely get there with the creatures though, right? Phantasmal Image, you could potentially just copy an opponent's creature. This one, you need to have the creatures of your own to be copying. But yeah, I think this one is really high up there. I'm going to put it above Seance and Phantasmal Image, probably below Blade Splicer Restoration Angel. Works really well with all the synergies, really good value. The flashback is sometimes going to be relevant, right? Especially if you're playing one of these slower decks that goes in the long game. I like this card a lot. Gifts Ungiven, this card is worth money, which is why you're going to draft it. It has synergies that are relevant here. It's instant speed, which is what the blue-black control list is going for. You can find cards with flashback, cards with unearth. Especially big synergies with things like Seance, where you could just fetch, you just grab 4 creatures with great enter the battlefield effects, and then no matter what your opponent does, you're taking 2 of your top 4 cards, putting them in your hand, and you're getting to get the enter the battlefield effects of whatever the other 2 are. That said, if this wasn't worth money, this would be a card that I'm not. This would be sort of like Stony Silence, but a little bit better, of course, because it actually has more relevance than Stony Silence, but still not something I'm going to pick very highly. I don't know. It still isn't bad on its own. Spending 4 mana and getting 2 of the best cards in your deck isn't that bad. Your opponent does know what they are, but you know, to be able to have that sort of card draw or card advantage at instant speed is going to be really big for the blue-black control deck. So this card isn't something I'm super enamored with, but I'm going to be pretty much drafting it every time I can just because of the money value of it. And there are decks where it's going to be useful in. So unlike Stony Silence, which is really kind of that gold standard for am I just drafting money here, right? Because this card is just not going to be making your decks, and it's only worth like $2 or $3. This one's worth like $5 or $6, and it does have relevance to the deck. So I'm going to be first picking this a lot of the time and stealing it out of packs, even when I'm not necessarily in the colors. Maybe to make it work. It is splashable after all, but mainly for the money. Venser Shaper Savant. Mistraven's a fantastic card. This guy's just better than Mistraven. Returning target spell or permanent to its owner's hand is a more flexible effect, and the ability to play this at flash is really, really big game. You know, if you could play Mistraven at flash, it would just be an obscene card. This is an obscene card by those standards. I don't know if it's necessarily the sort of bomb first pick Blade Splicer and Restoration Angel are, because it has 2 blue in the mana cost, but this is still the thing that you're going to first pick most of the time. It has synergies with a lot of things you're looking to do. It's a powerful effect, and yeah, this doesn't have the flying of Mistraven, I suppose, but flash is way more important of a keyword here, and this flexibility is huge. Being able to blink this can sometimes just lock your opponent out of the game, right? You'll just time walk them a bunch of turns because you'll be remanding, in a sense, their whatever card that is they're trying to play back to their hand again and again with these blink effects. And so I value this guy very highly, very first pickable. Deadeye Navigator. This guy is, I want to say, like just a control win condition. If I'm playing blue-black control, if I'm playing Esper control, even if I'm just playing sort of a slower blue-white blink deck. I mean, this ability, this activated ability that he has of 1 in a blue, exile this creature, then return it to the battlefield under your control. For one, it gives him protection, which is really nice, right? He soul bonds to a creature, and then when they try to get rid of this, you can blink this guy out. And just having a 5/5 that has some way of protecting itself, right? Sort of an Aetherling style thing, is really strong. The ability to reuse into the battlefield effects for 1 in a blue is sometimes just game ending, right? If you get to untap with this and have mana up, there's almost no way they can win, because if you have any sort of decent creature on the board, suddenly this is 1 in a blue, anticipate, this is 1 in a blue, bounce a creature, this is 1 in a blue, right? Do some crazy thing, right? Dinrova Horror or something. So this card is a bomb. I'm going to draft this very highly. It does fit particularly into an archetype, and it is not worth a lot of money. So kind of like Seance, this is one of these things that might come to you late. People are going to look at this and they're going to say, "Oh, but I'm green red, right? I can't use this," and you'll get this from them. But this is a very, very strong card, right? This is a very first pickable thing. This is the thing you see pack 2, I think, even, and you think, well, can I go into this color, right? Am I anywhere close to it? If I have some green-white thing going on, but I have enough enter the battlefield effects, this is one of the things that's really going to make me say, oh, I want to be blue now, because this is just a game-winning card, right? This is a bomb, one of the best bombs in the format, and it isn't worth money, but I'm going to be drafting it pretty highly. And of course, again, like with Venser, if you're able to get this and a Venser, you have some pretty big game. 1 in a blue, just return any spell that they have to their hand, use your extra mana to bounce all their permanents. This is pretty ridiculous, really, really strong. It's an Aetherling sometimes, even if you just have any creature to soul bond this with, right? This card becomes very hard to kill and becomes a good finisher for your control deck, because 5/5 is just going to be a pretty hard card to stop. And in a blink strategy as well, it's going to be getting, of course, crazy usefulness. So I like this card a lot. Draft it really highly. Death Shadow. This card is worth money, which is why I'm going to be drafting it. I don't think it's particularly strong in terms of what I'm trying to do. There's no real good way of lowering your own life total here. In fact, some of the Jund sacrifice type synergies raise your life total, right? Things like Falcon Wrath Noble. But this card is worth money, so I'm probably going to be drafting it every time I see it. It's just worth enough money for that to be the case. But I don't think this is a particularly strong card in Limited. Certainly it's no Stony Silence. This card can be just a good value 1-drop. If they don't have good spot removal, this card becomes really good. But I'm not super excited to play this in Limited, just because a lot of times this card just won't be relevant. I'll play it when I'm already losing the game, and he'll come down as like a 4/4, a 5/5, something like this, and then I'll just lose with the next attack, and I won't be very happy. But yeah, worth money, so expect to draft this. Sever the Bloodline. I like this card in a lot of ways. Of course, it's removal. It's sorcery speed, which is not quite what you're looking to do a lot of the time with this sort of blue-black control type strategy. But being an exile target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature means it has particular significance against a lot of these token decks, right? I'm going to exile a golem, and oh look, all your golems went away. The guy playing the Splicer strategy suddenly gets hosed. The fact that it has flashback is also nice. It gets you that extra relevance. A lot of the time, I'm just probably going to be getting value of this as just 4 mana, exile a creature. And it's nice that it exiles as well, because there's also these sort of unearth type strategies, right? There's a little bit of reanimator stuff going on. This is a solid removal spell. I'm going to say that. It's nothing too bomby, right? But it's a solid removal spell. I'm going to draft it as a solid removal spell. Damnation. Damnation I like a lot. I wasn't that big on Terminus. Damnation I'm bigger on, because I think 4 mana Wrath is pretty good. I'm not going to have these times where like I draw my Terminus, but I don't want to miracle it because it just isn't going to be very useful, right? And then it's a 6 mana Wrath, and that's not bad, right? But I'm not super excited about it. Damnation, I'm excited about it, one, because 4 mana and being able to reliably cast it for 4 mana when I want to is a big deal. But also, in black in particular, I'm going to have some synergies where I don't mind my creatures going to the graveyard, right? If I destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated, they go to the graveyard, and then I get to unearth a couple, right, and swing at my opponent and get points of damage in, suddenly the value of this becomes a lot clearer. So it's worth money, which is why you're going to draft it very highly. I think it's a good card as well. I think this is a very, very playable card, and so I'm going to draft it very highly. Desecration Demon. I think this card is a bomb. There's a lot of good single target removal, and there's also a lot of tokens. And so this card is, it's still going to have problems, right? But when you play this on turn 4, especially when you play it off of a signet, which I think is the big deal here, being able to cast this off of a signet being one of your sort of early 4-drop plays, which again, I really think signets are going to be one of the more powerful things you can do in this format. So Desecration Demon being at 4 mana is a really big deal. When you play this off of a signet, you'll just take a game, right? Even your token opponent isn't going to be able to get there in terms of sacrificing enough stuff to keep this guy tapped down, right? The go wide strategies aren't going to be able to go that wide that quickly, and this guy is going to have a pretty big game against a lot of that. And when you draw him late, in a lot of matchups, he's still going to be very relevant. They're not going to want to be able to just sacrifice creatures to this guy, tap him down. They're not going to like that. There is, again, a lot of single target removal. People are going to be able to kill this guy, as with any bomb. But, again, being able to play this guy turn 3 off of a signet, it's just very hard for any opponent to deal with that. There's really going to be a check, and there's going to be some opponents where their removal is Magma Jet, where their removal is Chandra's Outrage, where their removal is even Thunderous Wrath isn't going to be able to kill this guy, right? You're going to struggle sometimes to find a way to deal with this guy at 6 toughness. He's just not easy to kill. And yeah, I think this card is a savage beating a lot of the time. I want to play a lot of games where I play a signet turn 2, ramp into this guy turn 4, say go, and my opponent just snap concedes. Right? I can't beat this, he says, and we go next. I think this card is that good. I'm going to pick this very highly. It does even have some synergies with things like the sacrifice strategies with like Mortician's Beetle. Right? You could have turn 1 Mortician's Beetle, turn 2 signet, turn 3 this guy, and then suddenly they're up a creek without their paddle. This card's solid bomb, right? And I'm going to draft it very highly. Extractor Demon. This card's less of a bomb. Again, you can't play him off of a signet. He's 6 mana. He's a 5/5 flyer. He does have a lot of power here, though, and conveniently he isn't worth money, so he can go to you late, which I think will shore up your sacrifice strategy type stuff, that's in your unearth type strategy, stuff like this. Whatever you're trying to do in your black colors, right, with like either Jund or black red, or maybe Grixis. I think this guy will come to you a lot of the time, right? People won't be in black and they'll pass him to you, but I don't know. He's good. He's a 5/5 flyer for 6. You can unearth him, which is really solid. He usually is going to be milling yourself, so he helps with the Graveyard Matter synergy quite a bit. Solid card. I'm still going to be first picking it a lot of the time in a pack. This is not going to be the thing I'm going to be fighting over pack 2 or look to kind of splash pack 2, pack 3. Right? I see this going like pick 2, pick 3. In pack 1, I'm still probably taking it and making audible to go into black, but this card's good, but it's not crazy, I guess. It's solid. 6 mana. I can get to 6 mana, I think, in this format with the signets. And yeah, I think this guy's good, not crazy. Mind Shatter. Mind Twist is fantastic. Mind Shatter, just adding 1 mana to a card makes it a lot weaker. I do like that I could ramp, and there are going to be some games where my opponent is very clearly an aggressive strategy, and if I just play this for like 5 mana, yeah, I'll take some beatings from his creatures, but then he'll be in a point where he won't have really anything to follow up, right? He'll have to discard his Anthem, he'll have to discard whatever other creatures he's looking to follow up with, things of that sort. I think, in particular, the scenarios where I really like playing this card is when I'm on the play, and then especially when I'm on the play and my opponent mulligans, and then me making them discard these cards is pretty big. It's important that these aren't random cards, I guess is one thing to say. So even when I play this off of like a signet on turn 3, I'm actually, it's a Hymn to Turok that costs 4 mana, but I'm still probably getting decent value because I might be able to catch their land. I might be able to catch whatever the next play was. I can kind of really throw them off. I don't know. This is, again, kind of like Extractor Demon. I think it's a solid card. I'm just not going to be drafting it all that highly. If I have other options in colors that I'm with, right? 2 black and the mana cost is a little bit prohibitive in terms of splashing. I'll pass on this card a decent chunk of the time. Pack 1, pick 1, I definitely consider it. But yeah, this isn't one of these crazy cards I've talked about before, like Blade Splicer, Restoration Angel, Deadeye Navigator, etc. This is just a pretty good card. Goblin Guide. Goblin Guide is worth some money online. Not a whole lot. It's not like in paper. This guy is worth like $2 to $3 because they flash back the Zendikar set pretty frequently. So this guy gets reprinted effectively online quite a bit. This is definitely what you're looking to do, though, with the red strategies, right? If you're going to be base red, this guy is the sort of thing you want to have. You want to be attacking with Goblin Guide on turn 1. I mean, he's basically the best red aggressive creature in the format. And then you want to be following up with something like, Mog Flunkies, Burning Tree Emissary, stuff like that. It's nice that this guy is haste. Mog Flunkies is one of the creatures that you're going to be able to get a decent chunk of the time. And so having haste creatures is going to be nice for turning that guy on when you need to. This card is really good, and I'm going to pack one pick it a lot of time, even though I really don't want to be base red, and that's really where this guy fits, is being base red. I want to be drafting signets. I want to be casting my 4-drops on turn 3 and trying to win that way. But this guy's really solid. I mean, obviously he's played very heavily in Modern, but I think given what red is trying to do in this format, this is going to be one of the cards you want to see that to put you into red, right? I'm usually going to want to use red as a support color. This is going to be one of these guys I see that makes me think, okay, I'm not going to be using red as a support color of this game. We're going to be the Mog Flunkies deck. We're going to draft as many of these Burning Tree Emissaries as we can, and we're going to hit them hard really fast. So, great card. First pickable, very easily. Not a splashable card, really. You want to be one of these base red strategies, so you see this guy pick 3, and then he's in pack 3, he might be like, sorry, not pick 3, but pack 3, this guy might be the equivalent of your Stony Silence, right? Worth a few bucks, but probably not something you're going to play in your deck, simply because you aren't in the colors. So I don't know. Definitely has a lot more upside, pack 1, pick 1, though, than Stony Silence. Like, this is a card you will put in a deck. If you're base red, this is a card this might be the best card in your deck, quite frankly. Mizium Mortars. Just being able to deal 4 damage to a target creature I don't control at sorcery speed is solid, right? This is a great removal spell. Being able to wipe an opponent's board at 6, usually, and because 4 damage to creatures I don't control is probably going to kill most things. I mean, we've seen some things here that isn't going to kill, but this wipes out my Blade Splicers, my Restoration Angels, almost gets my Deadeye Navigator, right? Doesn't quite get my Desecration Demon or Extractor Demon, but is going to kill a lot of these 4/4 flyers in the format, is going to kill a lot of stuff in the format. I mean, this is basically... It's a 2-mana removal spell, top tier removal spell when you need it, and it's going to be a one-sided board wipe for 6 mana. So I like this card a lot. I'm definitely going to draft this a lot more highly than Terminus, right? Because this effectively is the same thing. I'm destroying all my opponent's creatures most of the time, and it has this upside of being able to play it for 2, whereas the upside on Terminus of being able to miracle it for 1 is not really that. I mean, I want to control when I'm doing my board wipes a lot of the time. I think there's going to be a lot of times where I draw my miracle like Terminus and I'm just not interested in casting it that turn, right? It's just not going to have a lot of upside. Being able to control when you cast it is better, and having this upside of 2 mana removal spells is a lot better. So this card's fantastic. I'm going to draft it very highly. Pyromancer's Ascension. This card is not actually worth that much money online. Again, because Zendikar gets reprinted a lot, and also because it's kind of out of flavor for Storm. It isn't very good in Limited either. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that has the same name as a card in your graveyard, you may put a quest counter on Pyromancer Ascension. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell while Pyromancer Ascension has 2 or more quest counters, yada yada. Well, the issue is, how am I going to put quest counters on Pyromancer Ascension? And also, what happens if this gets, like, blinked or something, right? What happens if, like... Because there are effects that'll, they'll bounce it with Cyclonic Rift. Like, what happens if my opponent finds a way to stop this guy from going up, bounce it back to my hand? That's even worse. Or they just have a disenchant randomly, right? They have a Sundering Growth and they bring this in. There are failure modes for this, right? That aren't even just the failure mode of not being able to cast instants or sorceries that have the same name as a card in my graveyard. I don't know. This card is not very good. You kind of have to be in a very weird place to want to use it. I think you need to have sort of these graveyard synergies, a lot of these mill cards. And there's some interesting stuff with that, like, there is flashback in this set, right? So there are some interesting things you can do there, and there are ways to mill yourself that are pretty effective. But I don't see myself in this format being able to draft a lot of the same cards, because, right, having duplicates of a card usually means that card is bad, right? If you were able to get duplicates of it, it usually meant people passed you a lot of this card, which means it probably wasn't a very valuable card. getting duplicate. Do I want to fill my deck with a bunch of bad duplicates to make this work? Not really. I don't know. I think this is going to be hard to turn on in limited. I think this is just kind of a whiff. They thought this card would be worth more money when they were designing the set, and this is one of these money cards like Blood Moon, which we're about to get into, which just isn't worth that much money anymore. It's different in paper, but again, online, Zendikar, right, gets reprinted a lot through flashback drafts. This card just isn't really worth picking pretty much ever. It's not worth enough, and it doesn't do enough. Blood Moon, this card is pack 1 pickable. This is worth a lot of money, and that's really the only reason you're going to take it, because hosing non-basic lands is kind of nice in this format. There are a lot of non-basic lands, but it's not that exciting. There are also signets for the mana fixing, which is frustrating, and it's a limited environment. People are, they're still going to have a lot of basics in their deck. They're not going to have a hard time playing around Blood Moon. This is money. This is not really a test, I think, in the same way that Stony Silence is a test, even though both cards have roughly the same playability in your deck, I think. Because this card is just worth so much more money. You're always going to draft this. It's going to win you the draft. You draft this card, and then you sell it to a bot, and you got back the money for the draft. Yeah, I mean, this card, pretty easily, you just draft it for the money. And what's kind of interesting is that as red, you don't like having one of your cards being taken up by this slot. You also don't mind it being drafted away from you by the people who are drafting money. I don't know what to think about that. I still don't want to be base red a lot of the time, but I'm going to be grabbing this for the money. Hellrider, I like this card a lot. It's weird because it's an aggressive 4-drop in a format where you're kind of given this choice between playing signets and then, casting a 4-drop, or playing, a bunch of 2-drops like Mog Flunkies, right? I'm kind of fine either way with this guy. If I have some signets in my aggressive deck, which I might, though I'm not going to draft them very highly, right? But if I just need some fixing because I'm like a Naya go wide aggro strategy, something like that, and so I have some signets in there, I like this guy. I mean, he's a 4-mana 3/3 haste, does 1 damage to the opponent when he attacks, and whenever a creature I control attacks, right, including the Hellrider, I deal 1 damage to the defending player. This is just a way for me to punch through damage a lot of the time. And I think this is actually one of the big challenges of a lot of these, and this is one of the reasons why I don't really like red as a color in this format. I feel like the games are going to go a little bit grindy, and you're going to get bogged down on the ground, and it's going to be hard to punch through the final points of damage, which is why I'm even considering cards like Scorched Rusalka for red as a common I want to pick up, because it gives me some way of punching through damage. This guy is punch through damage on a stick. Right, this is I have 6 creatures and my opponent has 6 creatures and I top deck Hellrider. Yeah, we play Hellrider. I swing. I do 7 damage regardless. That could just finish off the game. I don't have to do that much damage to my opponent in the first few stages of the game while they're playing their signets and I'm playing my Mog Flunkies for this guy to be able to get me there in the late game. I think this card is really strong. I'm going to draft it very highly. I think it, along with Goblin Guide, are going to be one of these rares that are going to be putting me into base red. Zealous Conscripts. Zealous Conscripts is pretty solid too. I mean, it's a threat and effect on a stick. It's gain control target permanent, so you, again, can do these kind of interesting things where you take their Planeswalker and ultimate them, right? This is a great card for beating the Lilianas of the Veil and so on and so forth. But there aren't a whole lot of those, right? You've got Lily, you've got Domri Raid. That's it. So, I don't know. The main synergy, of course, with this is with the sacrifice outlets. If you have a way to take their creature and then sack it, that's pretty good. One of the tricks, I suppose, though, is that this does cost 5 mana, and a lot of your sack outlets cost mana to activate, right? Even if it's only just 1 mana, like a Scorched Rusalka or a Golgari Rotworm or whatever, you do kind of need to play this as a turn 6 play, interestingly enough. And I don't know. I'm not super high on this card. It's aggressive in a format where I'm not really keen on aggression. It has synergies with an archetype that I don't really care to draft a whole lot. I do think this is going to be a solid card that'll come to you when you're in the in that sort of sacrifice strategy. I think this is the sort of thing you'll be able to pick up, like pick 3, pick 4 in the second or third pack, because other people just aren't interested in it, and it isn't worth money. I don't know. This is not a card I really want to pack 1, pick 1 though, because I don't like going into this archetype. I don't think this is enough to make the archetype, and yeah, I don't know. I'm just not super excited about this card. It's solid. If I'm in the archetype, I'm going to be drafting it, but I'm not crazy about this card. Ulvenwald Tracker. I think this card is great. Yeah, he's a 1/1 for 1, but this is actually one of these things that I want to be able to tutor up with my Ranger of Eos, because this guy, in kind of like Gideon's Lawkeeper, he works in so many different archetypes, right? Because he makes so many things difficult for my opponent. If I'm playing a go wide strategy like green red or even Naya tokens, right? This is just my way of taking some token that was going to die, right, when I swing in, and just sacking it effectively to deal 2 damage to an opposing creature, right? That's almost what this card does. This card is for two mana and tap, sack a Mog Flunky, deal 3 damage to a creature. Sometimes you don't even have to sack the Mog Flunky, right? You just kill the guy's stuff. And there's a decent number of things like, for the same reason why I valued Vithian Stinger, right? There's some things that you're just going to be able to kill for free a lot of the time, right? You have some 2/2 on the board and they play a Splicer. Well, you get to kill their Splicer, prevent them from blinking. It's instant speed as long as you keep this guy untapped, right? So it's always a combat trick your opponent needs to worry about. It prevents them from blinking a lot of stuff. This guy's just a really, really, really strong 1-drop. You notice there really aren't any other 1-drops. I think there are none besides Goblin Guide added at the rare or mythic slot here. So it's really just your Gideon's Lawkeepers and your Scorched Rusalkas and your, Avacyn's Pilgrims and stuff like that are filling in the 1-drop slot. This guy is one of these great 1-drops, and he's if I have him, I think I definitely want to pick up Ranger of Eos whenever I can, right? It's not that hard for me to splash white to get the Ranger of Eos, and even if I'm just like solidly green-red and I'm go wide, I want to pick up this guy a lot. Just having this ability on a stick is so good. And I understand he's a 1/1 for 1, but this is just so good of an ability. This guy's first pickable. I splash for him. It makes me pick other cards around him if I can. Really solid. Scavenging Ooze. This card's worth money. It's also pretty solid. I mean, there are a lot of graveyard things going on here. To be able to exile their unearth creatures, exile their flashback spells, a lot of really strong things you can do with this. So it's a bear with pretty good upside, and yeah, I understand it could be blinked and the counters could be removed from it, but just the ability to have a bear that just has graveyard hate synergy, even if there was never any putting of +1/+1 counters on this, just the random ability of this bear to hose stuff is really good. And the fact that he's worth money means I'm pretty much always going to pick him, because he's splashable, he's playable. I mean, he's at very minimum a 2/2 for 2, which is just a solid rate for me. And this effect, and I think in this format, is just really strong, which is why I'm going to be picking him, putting pretty highly and putting him on my decks. Call the Herd. When I talked about green-white populate, I talked about how strong or how important it was to draft the token makers first. This is a great token maker, right? This is basically one way to think about it. This is a 3-mana 3/3 that reads put a hill giant into your hand, right? Yeah, I'm going to take that all the time, especially I'll take this in a format that doesn't have the synergies with Populate. I'm going to take this in the format that does have synergies, right? This card's fantastic. I think this is going to be, along with things like Call of the Conclave, like this is going to be one of these cards that gets you there in the Populate deck. So I'm gonna draft it for that really highly. It's even just splashable, right? I don't even necessarily need to be on that Populate plan. Just to be able to get 2 3/3s on an installment plan is really solid, I feel. So I like this a lot. Thragtusk, this card is amazing. Card is just bonkers. There are blink synergies with this. And of course, the important thing to note for people who don't know, who didn't kind of play through this period of Magic, when Thragtusk leaves the battlefield, not when it dies, but when it leaves the battlefield, create a 3/3 green beast creature token. So for one, I care about the token synergies. For another, the blink synergies are huge, right? It has an enter the battlefield effect and a leave the battlefield effect, not even a die effect, right? This card is bomb. I mean, I'm going to pick this all the time. This is pack 1 pickable. This is splashable. This is the thing that puts you into green, even if you weren't green. In like pack 3, you say, okay, well, I've got a Signet. I'll draft some Guild Gates, right? Card's amazing. Draft this every time. Primal Command. Primal Command is kind of interesting because I think it really goes with this sort of green bluish ramp theme, this little sub theme that's going on here. There's kind of a ramp sub theme, and there's a little bit of a reanimator sub theme. And sometimes it's just going to be sorcery speed removal, right? Put target non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library. That's a decent effect, right? You take some permanent that you don't want to deal with, even just a token, right? Sometimes you'll just say, I want to deal with this slime molding token. Primal Command will do it there. And target player shuffles his or graveyard into his library. That's actually sometimes a reasonable effect in this format, right? They have a lot of stuff in their graveyard that you don't want to be there. They're bouncing things back with Seance. I don't want that. I might use this. Target player gains 7 life. This could kind of be relevant against the aggressive strategies. And then searching my library for a creature card, revealing it, putting it in my hand, right? This is, I think, big game for when I'm that ramp strategy, right? Because I'm not going to have a whole lot of huge payoffs. Arachna Spinner is probably going to be my most common one in sort of this green ramp type strategy. Although there is Simic Sky Swallower later on. There's like Craterhoof Behemoth. Putting a creature card into my hand is also going to be a pretty decent effect. So I don't know. I think this card is decent. I kind of want to be in a certain type of deck because a lot of time the most relevant mode, of course, is just going to be its sorcery speed removal of some permanent, right? But it just puts on top of its owner's library, and then like I gain 7 life or I do whatever. I don't know. I think for me to draft this very highly, for me to look at this pack 2 and say this is definitely what I want over some good uncommon removal spell, or maybe this is the thing that makes me want to go into green a little bit. I kind of want to have something in my deck that I want to fetch, right? I want to have open Thrag Tusk somewhere. I want to have even just something like Restoration Angel, or maybe like a particular splicer, like a Blade Splicer, Master Splicer, Deadeye Navigator. I don't know, but something. And I also kind of want to be ramping to get this, right? Because whatever that creature is probably going to have to be big, right? Like 5 mana removal spell, put a creature from my library into my hand. The creature, I feel like I need to get there with putting the creature from my library into my hand before this is relevant. So I don't know. This card's kind of weird in that, a lot of the strategies that green is trying to do, whether it's kind of go wide aggro with red, or it's more of a token strategy with white, or maybe it's like a splicer strategy. None of this really is that, dependent on tutoring a creature from your library. But there is sort of the sub-theme going on, and it's possible that I try the sub-theme. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but there are enough ramp cards. There are Sylvan Rangers, there's the Signets, there's Explorer, there's Avacyn's Pilgrim. There are a lot of things to get to, or to get you to this big mana state, and the format is reasonably slow, so I don't know. I need to play around with this card more before I really understand how good it is. My initial impression is that it's okay. I'm not going to be going bonkers about it, but I don't know. I'm open-minded about this card and how good it's going to be. Summoning Trap is sort of the same story. I don't really expect my creature spells to get countered. What I really like about this, though, is I pay 6 mana. I look at the top 7 cards in my library, which in Limited is a lot of my library. And oh, look, I got to put a Craterhoof Behemoth into play. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that nice? Right? This goes with the ramp strategy really well. And if you just happen to be playing against a guy you'll get to cast this for 0 against, right? That's amazing, right? Some guy goes to counter your Thrag Tusk and then suddenly Hoofy's the one stomping him. But I don't know. This is another one of these ramp sub-theme cards. And I think kind of the interesting thing is, I am drafting this set and still caring about my tickets. I still want to draft value. I am really interested, though, to see if these like sort of Reanimator and ramp sub themes can get there. And I think one of the cards that's going to, eventually I'm going to try one of these sub themes, and one of the cards that's going to get me there and into doing it is going to be something like Summoning Trap, right? That I'm going to open this, and there's not going to be a lot of other great stuff in the pack. I'm going to say, all right, let's try Summoning Trap, and then I get a few good, green uncommons or commons or whatnot. I find something else. I'm like, all right, and we try and make it work. Because I don't even necessarily need to bring out Craterhoof Behemoth all the time, right? I don't need to necessarily find Craterhoof Behemoth to try and make this strategy work. Craterhoof Behemoth, of course, would be another card that would get me into trying this ramp idea. I could just go, if I look at the green uncommons, I'm fine with like Arachna Spinner, right? I'd be fine with this guy as my payoff. A 5/7 reach is pretty big game. There's not a lot that's really that huge in this format. That guy could get me there. So I don't know. This card is interesting. It's, of course, mainly going to be 6 mana, look at the top 7 cards, put a creature card on the battlefield. You're going to want that ramp synergy. I don't know really how to evaluate these. I'm hoping, like, I'm hoping this ramp sub-theme kind of works because the cards like Primal Command and Summoning Trap make their way around the table to you, right? That people don't get the idea that these cards are really that good. They have to be specifically into that weird sub-theme that isn't really talked about. And I don't know. It's possible. I like this even more if I somehow get to like Gristlebrand, right? Like if that's something that I have, I'm like Jund. I don't know, and I could combine the two strategies. I maybe have some ramp, although a lot of that ramp is sort of blue based, which is interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious about this card. I'm at some point I'm probably gonna draft this and find out whether it works or doesn't work. I'm gonna guess right now it doesn't work, just because you're gonna be casting 6, and paying 6 to get a spider is all right, but like I don't know. I'm curious about this card. I'll leave myself open. Aether Mage's Touch. This is like the bad version of Summoning Trap, honestly. Reveal the top 4 cards of my library. I may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. It gains at the beginning of your end step. Return this creature to its owner's hand. So I spend 4 mana. I reveal only the top 4 cards of my library, not 7. 4 is almost half of 7. So I could whiff on this, right? And I put the rest of the cards revealed on the bottom of my library in any order, so it doesn't have this sort of graveyard synergy. It's interesting because it can provide me a surprise blocker, but I'm playing this instant speed, which means I'm kind of more this like deck that wants to play things at instant speed, which means I'm not playing a lot of creatures. I don't know if I'm going to get any good surprise blockers out of this. I don't know. This is kind of like 4 mana, and then if it works, you get an enter the battlefield effect at instant speed, and you get to draw a card. Is that really enough? I have to imagine this card is going to whiff a decent chunk of the time. Yeah, I'm just not super sold on this card. I'm not going to draft it very highly. I'll if I see this going late, of course, and I'm already in the colors, and yeah, I'll be thinking about it. But again, especially when you get to these multicolored cards, some of these single colored cards are pretty specific to an archetype, and so I didn't really value them that much. Primal Command, Summoning Trap, I'm curious about because there is like they're not even part of a theme, they're part of a sub theme, right? Zealous Conscripts was kind of one of them. Things of that sort, right? Gifts Ungiven a little bit there, like, or even like Seance was a good one. Seance was one of the good ones that I wanted, I think. But there are cards that are kind of specific to a sub theme. When you start getting into 2 colors, you're really getting more into that sub theme, or one of these archetypes, I should say, not sub theme. Sub theme is like the ramp type stuff. I'm talking about like a color combination, right? Things like Zealous Conscripts are meant to go in like Jund, red, black, whatever. There are some of those monocolored cards that are like that, but when you get to the multicolored cards, those multicolored cards are that, right? You have to be able to pay these 2 mana costs. It's not just like the card loses value if you're not, playing some black in your with your Zealous Conscripts. And so pack one, pick one, these things go down a lot in value for me. And this one doesn't have a lot of value to begin with, I don't think. I'm not really excited about this. So this is something that I'm going to let go pretty late too. If I'm not in these colors, I'm going to have no trouble passing this. And even if I'm in these colors, if I see something decent, I might still be passing this, like pick 6, pick 7. That's kind of weird to say for a rare that I would be passing it, pick 6, pick 7. But this is one of those cards. I just don't think it's very strong. I think it's better than some other, commons and uncommons, but I'm not a lot of them. Obsidat is great. I'll say that. But he's Esper, and he's 2 white, 2 black. So even though Esper's kind of blue based, I really need to have a lot of fixing for this guy. He's a 5-drop, which is a little bit worse for me than a 4-drop in terms of getting him out. I don't know. He does so much though, in the sense that he's a 5-mana 5/5 that my opponent can only kill with instant speed removal. And there's a decent chunk of that, but like even when he comes into play, my opponent loses 2 life and I gain 2 life. This guy is a win condition. This guy will close things out really fast. The problem, of course, is that he puts you in Esper. Orzhov is not a deck in this format. That makes it hard for me to pack one, pick 'em. And this is maybe where people's draft strategies get a little bit different. And it's a little bit tricky too, because we're talking about a format where you can spend some picks on things like Obsidat, and if they don't work out, you're still fine, right? You're still going to find the playables for your deck probably. But like, would I draft this guy over Path to Exile is a question. Would I draft this guy over just some solid monocolored uncommon, right? Would I draft this guy over Flicker Wisp? I don't know. It's difficult to say. I guess part of that depends upon how reliably I think I can get fixing, right? If I play a lot of drafts and people just aren't drafting signets very highly, and I feel like I can get a lot of these signets pretty easily, then this guy moves up a lot in rankings because I just feel like I'm going to be able to play Esper, not just Esper, but Esper that's able to afford double white, double black more often, right? This is a very restrictive mana cost here for a format that doesn't have white black as a color pairing that has an archetype, right? So I don't know. This card is very strong. Obviously, it's a 5/5 for 5 mana that does crazy things. Whoops. But I just still don't see myself picking this first pick a lot of the time. It's just too tricky, right? These are enemy colors. I don't know. I'll see. I'll see how the draft strategies kind of work out, and whether or not this is that great. But I really want to know that I can get there with the mana fixing, right? With this mana cost, I really have to feel like I can get there with the mana fixing. And if I don't feel like that's reliable, I feel if like people are drafting Signet's second, third pick pretty consistently in this format, right? If they're drafting them really highly, then I think this guy just won't get there, and I'll actually pass on him when there's a solid uncommon in the pack. Evil Twin's pretty interesting. So to read the text, you may have Evil Twin enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it gains blue and a black, destroy target creature with the same name as this creature. You can play this as just a clone on your own creature, and it won't have this ability to just destroy something. And that maybe is a little bit less value, but if your enter the battlefield effect is good enough, if I'm just playing a 4-mana clone my Dinrova Horror, I'm pretty happy about that still, right? And this maybe sometimes I get a little bit of upside. My opponent plays a Dinrova Horror too, and I get to use that. I don't know. Of course, usually this is what you're doing as a blink strategy, right? The idea is you put this guy into play, you destroy some creature with his ability, ultimately, and then you blink him to copy another of your opponent's creatures, and the guy is just a serial killer running around stalking stuff. Even when you're not getting that, even when he's just like a 4-mana clone, even though he isn't instant speed like Cackling Counterpart is, right? There are a lot of situations where I'm going to want that clone, right? Where I'm going to be happy with that. And I think this guy has extra flexibility because I don't necessarily need to be in that blink strategy, right? I could just be blue-black control, and then I use this guy just as a removal spell, right? I play him, and he copies whatever my opponent's nice creature is, right? And that gives me a blocker. It's a thing that I do on turn 4. And then I just get to kill my opponent's creature next turn, right? Even if I'm just copying their Mog Flunkies, I'm playing this off of like a Signet, right? I get to kill their Mog Flunkies next turn, and then I have a Mog Flunkies of my own. That's reasonable, right? It's obviously not the best use case of this, but when I go up even against these aggressive decks, I'm going to have some good times doing this. And there are going to be some games where just, we're both playing the Signet game, and their turn 4 play is, I don't know, a Tower Gargoyle. My turn 4 play is an Evil Twin copying the Tower Gargoyle. And then if they don't have removal, I just get to kill their Tower Gargoyle for free and have one of my own left around with potentially more upside later on if I can blink things and do whatever. I like this card a lot. Again, multicolors makes it a little bit difficult, but I feel like this fits into a broader range of archetypes, right? I could just be playing blue-black instant control and still kind of value this guy. If I'm playing Esper Blink, right? Or like even just sort of a blue-black where I grab some blink spells from blue, I think this guy is really solid. Of course, again, there are some crazy synergies when you get like this, plus your Deadeye Navigators and things of this sort, right? There's other stuff, but like even just with the commons and uncommons, I feel there's enough synergy and just enough usefulness on his own that I'm going to pick this up pretty highly. Niv Mizzet Draco Genius, same sort of story as Obsidian Ghost Council. A really hard mana cost. It's enemy colors, right? And again, this guy is game winning. Like Obsidian, you throw him down, and it's just going to be really hard for your opponent to win if they don't have an answer to it. Unlike Obsidian, this guy's a little bit easier to clear because sorcery speed removal will get the job done. He also costs 6 mana as opposed to 5 from Obsidian. But I'm really mostly worried about paying this blue-red mana cost because this means, right, that I'm base black effectively. I'm a Grixis deck because Izzet is not really a supported deck here. And yeah, this is a pretty crazy effect. I can just pay blue and a red deal 1 damage to my opponent, draw a card. Just being able to draw a card for 2 mana is pretty crazy. A 5/5 flyer is a really good body in this format where most of the flyers top out at like 4/4. But again, really restrictive mana cost. I mean, he's a good finisher in a lot of these control-y shells, and this is these are control-y colors. But I just don't know. This is, again, another one of these cards that I'm going to struggle to figure out whether or not I pick them pack 1 over a really solid uncommon, because this limits me so much more. And it comes down to whether or not I can find the fixing, right? And it comes down a little bit to, how many picks can I waste on speculative stuff like this that might not get there, right? Do I draft a card that really only fits in this sort of Grixis style thing, right? I don't know. I'm still probably not going to, initially I'm just not going to pick this guy very highly. Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, 4/1 flying haste, the ability to gain indestructible, putting the +1/+1 counters on this guy is probably less likely. There are some humans in this format. The Splicers, Ranger of Eos, Gideon's Lawkeeper, right? I mean, I don't know. There are more humans out there and about, but a 4/1 flyer that can give itself indestructibility is really hard to beat, right? As I said before, a lot of the flyers in this format top out at 4 health, and so this guy is really solid. And I think this is one of these cards that is going to pull me into the black-red sacrifice strategy. It's not as, in Evil Twin was like you want to be able to blink this guy sometimes. Falcon Wrath Aristocrat is more specific, right? In that it's not just that I want to be able to sacrifice creatures to this guy, it's that I almost need to sacrifice creatures to this guy. I can't just play this in a deck where I don't have blink effects like I could Evil Twin. I can't just play Falcon Wrath Aristocrat when I don't have some sacrifice fodder for this guy. It gets a lot less valuable. So this isn't like a control finisher. I can't be like Grixis with this is one of my only few creatures. But again, this body lines up really well against the format. This is the sort of thing that'll kill all the flyers that get put in front of it, no problem. There aren't going to be a lot of things that stop this. Really, one of the few is going to be Wall of Denial. That's going to be a difficult one for you to get around. But besides that, this card is just going to put your opponent on a very fast clock. It's 4 mana. I love 4 mana things, again, with signets. I think this is a really big deal, this 4 mana cost. I'm going to draft this pretty highly, even though it's multicolored. I like this card a lot. Abrupt Decay. Abrupt Decay is worth money. Not a whole lot, but it's also a decent card. Not being able to be countered by spells or abilities isn't super relevant. There aren't a whole lot of counters in this format. Destroying target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less. I mean, again, this is less relevant in a limited environment. It's also less relevant in a limited environment where, again, I think a lot of the strongest things are going to be Signet turn 2, turn 3, play my 4-drop, which is going to escape these the sort of effect. But I'm still going to pick this card reasonably highly just because of the money value. It's enemy colored, which is bad, but it's removal. And if it's worth money and it's decent removal, I'm probably just going to take it. This is, I might be passing Stony Silences a decent chunk of the time because 2-3 ticks for something that doesn't do anything is not really what I'm looking for. A somewhat narrow removal in a very specific color combination, Jund in this case, because again, these are enemy color pairs, isn't great, but it's better than just a blank, right? So I don't know. I'm going to be picking this card for the money value. If this card wasn't worth any money, I think I'd actually be picking it a lot lower because, in particular, it's enemy colored pairs. I don't think it's really that great of a removal spell when all is said and done. It does hit things like Gaia's Anthem and these enchantments, right? The intangible virtue. So that's nice. It does have that extra flexibility. But I'm just not super sold on this. Wart the Raid Mother. It's a 6 mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, though, you create 2 1/1 red and green Goblin Warrior creature tokens, and then each red or green instant or sorcery spell you cast has Conspire. Now, the green part of this, probably not as relevant. The red part of this, extremely relevant, because if I get to double up on all my red removal, let's just go to red for a second. if I get a double up on my ground assaults, if I get a double up on my auger sprees, if I get to double up on my thunderous wraths, if I get to double up on my Chandra's outrage, my magma jets, even just dragon fodder, which is kind of interesting, right? That's a lot of value. That's just quite honestly a lot of value. That effect is pretty good. Green, you have a little bit less. I mean, I guess I could be doubling up and explore. Strength in numbers is probably one of the big ones that I want to double up on, right? If I'm especially in this sort of go wide strategy. Slime molding is kind of interesting, right? That's a pretty decent effect, but not a whole lot. Maybe Call of the Conclave. It's really the red stuff that I'm most interested in. Right, my really good removal spell. So given that there's a lot of stuff that I want to conspire in red, I like this card a lot. And again, 6 mana 3/3, but has this synergy, or sorry, not a synergy, has this extra effect, 2/1/1 Goblin Warrior creature tokens, right? It's really 5/5 for 6 mana, which is a better rate. And I don't know, it's even possible that you find some enter the battlefield synergies. You kind of have to be, I guess, Naya to make that work, or maybe you could run this in like Bant. Although again, the red conspiring type stuff is something I want to achieve. The green conspiring stuff is not really something I'm looking to achieve. In any case, I think this card is solid. It's like an interesting finisher a lot of the time, I think, for these go wide strategies. If I'm able to get there with a lot of the removal. Right, being able to double up on my removals a really good effect, and being able to put out 3 bodies is also pretty solid. So I don't know, it doesn't seem that impressive in a sense. 6 mana for a 3/3, even when it brings along 2 1/1s, But I'm willing to go on this card. And also, one of the nice things is it's a multicolored card, but I'm not necessarily green-red with this, right? I do want to be red, I think, a lot of the time, but I'm not even necessarily green when I go this, right? I don't necessarily need to be green. I could be just red-black, right? I could even just use this as like part of my Grixis control type thing. This could be one of these extra effects. If I'm going something like base blue-black, but splashing red for a lot of removal that I'm able to pick up, then this becomes really good. So I don't know. It fits in a lot of strategies, I feel, and the flexible mana cost is part of that. But you know, it has this go wide effect, and then being able to get back or be able to double up on red removal, I think is really strong. So I like this card. I'm actually going to pick it pretty highly a lot of the time. Boros Reckoner. Again, Boros, enemy colored pairs, rough, and this mana cost is, you know, even though it's hybrid mana, this is going to be pretty stringent. Like I think you're going to want to be both red and white. It's just going to be hard to cast like on turn 3, something like this. I don't know. It's a 3/3 that I can give first strike, and it probably has an effect when it dies, right? Of being able to lightning bolt something. I'm not going to draft this very highly. It's just the problem is this mana cost is really awkward, and it's not really something I'm looking for in a lot of my go wide type strategies. I don't know. It's interesting if I get this with, I don't know, Ulvenwald Tracker, right? Then I can have this fight things and still be able to kill other things. I don't know. This is kind of interestingly something of an answer to a lot of these go wide strategies, in that if they attack with a bunch of creatures, I get to block with this guy against some 2/2, and then I get to kill 2 things. I don't know. Again, enemy colored pairs, and it isn't really like that key of a card. I'm going to pass a lot of time on this. Advent of the Worm. This card is fantastic. Instant speed. In this format, I would be taking this at sorcery speed, but instant speed, create a 5/5 green worm creature token with trample. Has trample too. This could be sorcery speed without the trample. I'd still be taking this because 4 mana, create a 5/5 token that I want to populate. I've said it before in the green-white video. You want to be taking these token makers to make the populate strategy work. This is one of the best ones. This is the rare version of Call of the Conclave. You're gonna grab these every time you can, whenever they're past you, once you know you're in that archetype, and it's gonna be really strong. Simic Sky Swallower, Flying Trample Shroud 6/6. Yeah, this is a great finisher. It's Simic colors, which is not good for you because it puts you into Bant. But Simic colors are also these ramp colors. So this is one of these cards that I'm looking to ramp into. this is a good ramp target, right? This is one of these cards I want to hit off my summoning trap. This is one of these cards that I'm looking to put in my hand with Primal Command. This is what I want to play after I've played a bunch of Coiling Oracles and Sylvan Rangers and Explorers, and I'm even ramping to this with my my Avacyn's Pilgrim. This sub-theme is here, and this is part of the sub-theme. I don't necessarily need to get Creative Hoof Behemoth to make this work. Flying, Trample, Shroud, 6/6 is just, in terms of all the creatures that we've seen, this is just like a card that says, you have a few turns to figure out what to do, otherwise this card is going to win me the game, right? You can't target it with removal. There is, again, some board wipes in here in this format, but the board wipes you're usually looking at to play around are things like Pyroclasm. It's harder for your opponents to have Damnation or Terminus or things of this sort. Just a huge deal that this has Shroud and such a huge body. There's not a whole lot that stops this. Arachnus Spinner is really one of the few ones. And, you know, I don't know, something like Gristlebrand or maybe like, where was it? Desecration Demon. But it's going to be pretty hard for your opponent to beat this a lot of times. If you can ramp into this and you're not dead, this is just going to close out a lot of the games. Very, very hard for opponents to beat. Really strong. Part of what makes me kind of interested in this ramp strategy, again, though, it is Simic colors. It's enemy-colored pairs. It puts you specifically into an archetype. And even then, this isn't really something I want to be doing in Bant, just as sort of this normal Splicer, Blink, Populate strategy. This is part of this sub-theme of ramp and maybe reanimation. And I don't know what to make of this. Again, I don't know how good that sub-theme is. It isn't super well supported. But, you know, possibly cards like this just go late because they don't fit into anywhere. And so this sub-theme, even though it's small, might be able to get there in some drafts because, you know, they're just the cards go around, you know? Zero the Enchanter. Esper colors, so I'm already locked into 3 colors specifically. This is, you're not even playing around with these enemy color pairs. This is just the whole slice of the pie, right? It's a 1/4 flyer for 4 mana, and I've talked a lot about how I want to ramp out 4-drops. Whenever it attacks, I can search my library for an enchantment card with converted mana cost 3 or less and put it on the battlefield. And then if I do shuffle my library, this effect isn't that good. I guess the short of it, I mean, I've got maybe Intangible Virtue, but that's kind of a weird thing to be doing if I'm Esper. I think the biggest one is Seal of Doom, right? If I can pick up a lot of Seal of Dooms, this guy becomes really good because then every time he attacks, I get to destroy a creature and it can't be regenerated. That's pretty nice. I don't remember if there's anything in white besides Intangible Virtue that I was really that concerned about. I could put things like Gift of Orzhova on this, but I'm not really excited about that card. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Intangible Virtue, maybe. But there's just not a whole lot here that I'm really looking to do with a lot of this stuff. Are there any blue anythings? Yeah, I mean, there just isn't a lot to fetch with Zur when it comes down to it, right? I can't fetch Soul Ransoms and things of this sort. So it's not a good card, I'm going to say. I'm not going to draft this very highly at all. I might grab this in Esper when I already have some Seals of Doom, but I'm just going to pass this almost always. I'm just not excited about this card. There's just nothing for him to fetch, and a 1/4 flyer for 4 mana is not what I'm looking for. Yeah, I'm not into this. Cruel Ultimatum. Cruel Ultimatum, for those of you who don't know, target opponent sacrifices a creature, discards 3 cards, then loses 5 life. You return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, draw 3 cards, and gain 5 life. Yeah, if you get to cast this, this is big game, as the kids say. And the problem, I guess, is casting it. This is a very big mana cost. Not just with it costs 7 mana, but also you gotta have the right combination of mana in 3-color thing. I don't know. Again, I'm going to value this higher than something like Opportunity, I think. Just because even though it's tricolored, a lot of times when I'm playing like a card like Opportunity, I kind of want to be playing these sorts of colors anyways, right? I want to be like blue-black, splashing red, this sort of thing. So this is something I really want for this archetype, right? In Grixis, this is the sort of Grixis deck I'm going to want to play. A very controlling deck that ultimately just wins through huge cards like Cruel Ultimatum, right? Like, my opponent doesn't have a hand. I have 3 cards in hand. I gain back some life. They lose a creature. I get another one from my, like, right? If I'm just putting 4 cards in my hand, stripping any answers my opponent have out of his hand, and then getting a little bit more on the board and in terms of my life total, yeah, I think I'm gonna win a lot of the games that I cast Cruel Ultimatum. The problem is getting to cast it, and I don't know. I'm probably not gonna first pick this a lot because of that, right? I'm not really sure. I want to be. I'm not really sure I'm gonna get there as that deck. I don't know. Again, really restrictive mana cost, really powerful effect, fits with the archetype that's looking to do, but I'm just not. I'm not sold on this. I'll be passing a decent chunk of the time, and I can't splash it, so it's gonna go around the table sometimes. Broodmate Dragon, 6 mana for 2/4/4 flyers, pretty good deal. It's Jund. I don't really want to play Jund, but this is a pretty solid Jund card. It's nice to ramp. It's nice to reanimate. It's doing that type of stuff as well. There's even some populate type stuff you could get going on. I feel like this is kind of another one of these 4-color good stuff cards, right? That'll all be something like, I don't know, black, red, green, white, right? And I'll be populating these tokens, or I'll be like black, red, green, blue, and I'll be finding a way to mill this into my graveyard and bring it back with Torrent of Souls. I mean, it's solid, though. 6 mana, 2/4/4 flyers. Again, 4/4 flyers in this format are roughly where things top out. There aren't a lot of things that are bigger than it. Right, there aren't a lot of things like Simic Sky Swallower, and what's really nice is I can kill Simic Sky Swallower with 2 Broodmate Dragons, right? So this card is good, but you have to be Jund, and you can't even really be that aggressive a strategy with Jund. I don't know. I think the format's going to be a little bit slower. Getting to 6 mana is going to be a little bit easier. I'm not super worried about this mana cost, unlike say like a Gristlebrand, right? 8 mana seems a much bigger leap than 6 mana. I only need a couple signets really to kind of get me there on a normal draw. I don't know. It's Jund, and that scares me off, but it's a really solid card. I'll actually probably end up first picking this a few times in a week pack, just because it's so good, and I'm willing to kind of force Jund. And it in a sense, it's splashable too. I could just be red-black splashing green. I could be green-red splashing black. I could even be one of those 4-color strategies. Like, I don't know. I'm interested in seeing how the 4-color strategies work out. This seems like one of the cards that would make it there. Unlike, say, Simic Sky Swallowers or the Enchanter, a lot of these other kind of, or even like Obsidat or Niv-Mizzet, because double mana cost, enemy colors is just more restrictive than one of each in a tricolor pairing, right? In an Alara shard, right? These are shard cards ultimately. Even though they are kind of guild cards, right? They are shard cards because their guilds aren't supported in this format. This is a shard card with just easier to cast mana symbols, right? So even though these cards are also very powerful, I'm going to first pick them a lot less than I am going to first pick Broodmate Dragon because of the castability of this. I think it's just a lot better for that regard. Again, I might take a really good uncommon like a Path to Exile over this. First pick, but I'm gonna do that a lot less often than I'm gonna do it with these guys that are also really powerful multicolor cards. Fiery Justice deals 5 damage divided as I choose among any number of target creatures or players. Target opponent gains 5 life. I mean, I don't know. If I'm Naya, I'm probably looking to be pretty aggressive, but this card is also just really good. 3 mana, deal 5. I care about my opponent's life total. I don't want it to increase, but it's just good removal, and it's bad because it's 3 colors, so that's just hard to splash. Again, I think my drafting strategy, at least at the start of this format, is going to be avoiding locking myself into some shard, right, and trying to keep open in my first few packs. That way, if I spend 6 picks just kind of looking around to see what's open, and then I kind of go into whatever randomly ends up to be open, there's a much better chance that I'm going to be able to cast a card like Wart the Raid Mother than a Fiery Justice. There's a much better chance that I'm going to be able to cast even just like an Ulvenwald Tracker or a Thragtusk over Fiery Justice. So this, again, almost all these multicolored cards, or pretty much all these multicolored cards, I'm not going to value the same as Blade Splicer, Restoration Angel, any of these like really bomby cards that just, Thragtusks that'll win me the game, that are monocolored. This card's still solid though. Like, I think the format's going to be a little bit slower. I think even the Naya go wide strategies are going to want some way of turning combat in their favor, right? They swing with their guys and then they Fiery Justice afterwards to kind of clean up whatever their opponent had, and then they're going to kill them next turn on the next swing. That seems like a pretty reasonable thing. I like this card a decent amount. This is this is what I want to talk about, I guess, more when I think about cards that make me want to splash into another color. When I'm green, white, populate or something, this is one of these cards that makes me think, yeah, I should be splashing red. I'm gonna pick this up. When I'm one of these colors or two of these colors, right? It's these cards like Broodmate Dragon. They're gonna draw me into that next color and make me say, yeah, I should start finding fixing for so I can play this card, right? Stoic Angel, kind of a similar story. It's a 3/4 flying vigilance for 4 mana. I love 4 mana cards. I've said this before. Players can't untap more than one creature during their untap steps. The nice part is she has vigilance, so she doesn't care about her own edicts here. She doesn't care about her own laws that she's laying down. And that means you just get to beat down in the air with her a lot of the times. And you'll probably close out a decent number of the games where they just can't put together a way to stop you, right? And you just keep on swinging in with your 3/4, and they, maybe chump with their 2/3s that they were able to leave untapped. But unless they find an answer, she just wins you the game. I like this card a lot. 3 colors makes it hard to cast, but solid card. I'm going to rate it up there with like Broodmate Dragon. I really like that it costs 4, and I think that there's a decent number of times where it's going to win a game, right? Kind of the same way that Broodmate Dragon comes down and it wins a game. This card is going to come down. Your opponent is going to have fewer turns to find an answer to it compared to Broodmate Dragon, and yeah, you're gonna get there. You're gonna pound their face a bunch of times, have a few removal spells or tricks to back this up, right? Maybe like they go to remove this, you blink this with Ghostly Flicker, and you didn't get value off of it, but they still don't have an answer for your guy, and you get there. I like that. Finally, we have in the rare slot the lands and the artifacts. All these fetch lands I'm going to be first picking pretty much every time because they're just worth enough money when it comes down to it, and I could put them in my deck conceivably. Right, they could be fixing whatever I'm one of these shard strategies, but the main thing is going back to my my price sheet here, which I haven't updated that recently. But even the cheapest card, the Marsh Flats, I can still probably sell for $440. For me, that's kind of the line that I'm going to draw where I'm going to say, all right, I'm always going to pick a Marsh Flats just because $4 is $4. But yeah, these cards aren't by themselves really that strong. They aren't fetching dual lands, and the colors that they support are only really relevant in some cases, right? You need to be three colors basically to work these. You can't just be a 2-color deck and this is just your extra fixing. This is really a 3-colored thing. So I don't know. I'm not super huge on these cards as limited. I'm really just going to always draft them as money cards. Basilisk Collar. This card's decent. I mean, it's 1 mana to play. Equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink. The Death Touch part is particularly relevant when you have something like, well, I guess to some extent you could always draft a Niv Mizzet. That's not bad. You could also draft like an Uvenwald Tracker. And then, surprise, surprise, you put your collar on your bear and your bear always wins fights. That's pretty awesome. But for the most part, the card that I really want to pair with this is Vithian Stinger. Right? Vithian Stinger is the pinger in red. Really solid. Vithian Stinger is actually one of the uncommons that I'm thinking about when I'm considering whether or not I'm drafting any of these rares. Am I drafting these rares over a Vithian Stinger is one of these cards, right? That, Path to Exile, right? Top tier removal and these really good effects like Vithian Stinger, these pingers. I mean, he's the only one, but like good effects like a pinger like him. That's what I'm considering. This guy works fantastic with that. And I don't even mind him just kind of on its own. Giving a creature Death Touch and Lifelink is pretty decent. I kind of imagine myself playing this more, or wanting this a little bit more in decks where I'm playing like a 2/3 flyer. Because there are a lot of 2/3 flyers in this format, and the ability of a 2/3 flyer to get through another 2/3 flyer seems pretty decent. I'm not really sure how relevant it is on the ground. Like on the ground, it seems a lot of the creatures kind of have the same power and toughness, so maybe this guy helps you trade up a little bit, right? Your 3/3 kills their 4/4. I don't know, but I feel like a lot of times when you're attacking in with this, your opponent's just going to be blocking your 3/3 with their own 3/3 a lot of the time, and you're not quite going to get there. I don't know. To some extent, I want to do it with flyers. To another extent, I kind of want to do this with like unearth creatures. I take my unearth creature, I unearth him for a few mana, equip this to him, swing in with him. next, like, he dies, he maybe gets in his damage, he gains me some life, and then I put the collar back on whatever my defense creature is. And that's the way I grind out a win as one of these unearth strategies, is I just have a Basilisk collar and I keep on putting it on my unearth creatures and swinging in with, one at a time and slowly grinding my opponent out. He's maybe trying to race me in the air with some 4/4 flyer, but I have lifelink on these, 2 power, 3 power tough, 3 power creatures that I'm unearthing from the graveyard, right? And he can't attack him with the rest of his stuff because I'm always able to put this back on whatever it is that I don't know. I have some imagination of where I want to use this card. That said, it doesn't seem overwhelmingly powerful with anything but like a Vithian Stinger. It doesn't seem broken with anything but that. And so I'm probably not looking to draft this very highly as a result, even though it is a colorless card that does have some flexibility. I don't know. I see myself pack one picking this a lot just because it is colorless. It leaves me open. And I mean, let's be honest, it's not always that you're going to get a great uncommon that you're going to draft with this, or great common that you would draft over this. Is a pretty solid effect. But I don't know. Like, I also think I'm going to find myself sometimes, if I'm like pack 2 and I kind of already know what I am, I'm going to pass this card a lot of the time, right? Because the advantages of it being colorless and leaving me open aren't going to be there. And I don't want to say the card is specific to a particular archetype, but there are cards that I want to see with it before this equipment really becomes that valuable to me. Death Touch and Lifelink by itself with no increase in stats is not so great, I want to say. So I will pass on this a lot of times in like pack 2, pick 3, or not, sorry, pack 2 or pack 3, right? Or like later picks, maybe even of pack 1. If I don't feel like it's particularly relevant to me, if like the Death Touch in particular is not something I'm looking for. But I'll be picking it early a lot of time just because it leaves me open. That's sort of my view on it. Grafdigger's Cage. This card's worth money, so I'm going to draft it. It does randomly just hose decks that are kind of reliant on flashback cards and unearth cards. And I guess to some extent hoses, maybe randomly like Summoning Trap. And there's not a lot of like incidental artifact hate in this format, so I think this is, it's going to... Your opponent probably doesn't want to bring in like Ancient Grudge just to deal with a Grafdigger's Cage, I feel. I don't know. Maybe they will. Either way, this card just isn't that great. It's a sideboard card that I actually would consider, whereas Stony Silence I wouldn't consider. It's also worth more money than Stony Silence. Anyways, I'm just going to be drafting this for the money, though. I'm not really concerned about having sideboard cards like this, and it's... I don't know. Damping Matrix. This is a sideboard card that isn't worth money. Activated abilities of artifacts and creatures can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. So this obviously has some limitations in that it doesn't hit mana abilities. The thing is, though, Unearth is an activated ability. That's really important to note. And so there's just sort of randomly these hate cards for things like an Unearth strategy, which I guess is fair because a lot of these bounce effects and blink effects are sort of like incidental hate for these token strategies, right? They bounce or they blink your token and then it's gone, right? You have cards like, what was it? Vanish into Memory. Vanish into Memory is by itself not that great of a card. Against tokens, though, it's fantastic. So, like, this is a card that I almost really want to have in my sideboard a lot of the time. I might not main deck it, but, like, I want it in my sideboard because it'll just hose people. Going back to this. Damping Matrix is maybe a card I want to bring in against these Unearth strategies. As narrow as it is, there's basically a whole archetype that's kind of really built on this. And if I can hose Unearth, that seems worth it, right? If suddenly my opponent's Grixis Slave Drivers are just not really that impressive, if a lot of their cards just aren't doing what they need them to do, if they can't have their strategy of like grinding me down with, putting a Basilisk Collar and a bunch of Soul Bond stuff on some Unearth creature, swinging it, like having one super-powered sacrificial creature running in each turn. If they can't do that or make that work because I'm shutting that down, maybe I just win the game because it doesn't even matter. Like I stick the Damping Matrix, I have a few creatures to block, and then just in the long game, their ability to grind out a win is gone, and I take the game. So I don't know. I'm going to pick this as a sideboard card a lot of the time, right? If I see this going like 7th to 8th pick, I'll say to myself, yeah, I could use this. And because it's colorless, I'm going to be able to use it in almost all my decks. So unless I see some, good uncommon or common for my archetype, I'll pick this up as a sideboard card fairly early on and be pretty happy with it. It's kind of a weird thing to say. A lot of these other sort of sideboard cards I wouldn't really pick up like that, but I don't know. This one I would, right? I don't care about Stony Silence. I like this card a lot. Finally, the Mythics. Linvala, Keeper of Silence. Well, same sort of thing as Damping Matrix, but better because she's on a 3/4 flyer for 4 mana. Again, I love 4 mana. That's a great mana cost. It means that I play a Signet turn 2, play a land turn 3, get to cast this. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. Great. Fantastic. I mean, I guess in a weird sense, this is one-sided. It's creatures your opponent control. Damping Matrix is for all of them, so I guess this is a sideboard card I'm not really interested in picking up when I'm the guy looking to unearth stuff, right? Fair warning, don't draft this as a sideboard card when you are the unearth strategy. So keep that in mind. But Linvala is just sort of this incidental hate for this. You're going to draft her because she's a 3/4 body, flying for 4 mana. That's good. You're going to also like her whenever you randomly run into these guys that wants to activate abilities and can't. Right, that's gonna be pretty frustrating for them. And there's a decent number of activated abilities, especially when you consider all the unearthed creatures. Right, you have some like Evil Twin, Niv Mizzet, right, Scavenging Ooze, Ulvenwald Tracker, right. There are other abilities going on here that are reasonable, but the main thing this hits is unearth, and I'll play this just as a 3/4 flyer, right. But a 3/4 flyer with surprisingly relevant upside. Entreat the Angels, I'm going to be drafting this. Anytime I can pay this 2 white mana cost, I don't even really care how many white angels I get, right? Like, I'm willing to spend ultimately 5 mana if I just have this in my hand. I'll spend 5 mana just to get a 4/4 flyer, right? That's not horrible value. That's kind of the worst case scenario of this card, right? But sometimes I'm just going to get, this is going to be like my Broodmate Dragon, right? That's what this is going to be. I'm going to get flying angel creature tokens, which is going to be nice for all my populate strategies, which, by the way, is a little bit better than it is with the compared to Broodmate Dragon, because Broodmate Dragon is not white, which has a lot of the populate effects. So you kind of want to be this 4-color thing if you're going to get value off of having the flying 4/4 token. This is in white. I can pair it with any other colors, green being one of them, right, for the extra populate effects. And then, even if I only if on turn 3, I miracle this, right? Or I guess turn 4. I guess it depends on whether or not I have a Signet, right? If I have a Signet, then I could do this on turn 3. But if I on turn 4, I have 3 lands in play, or I have, a Signet in play and some lands, whatever. If I'm able to miracle this and just get 1 white angel token, I feel like that's just going to win a lot of time. I'll have turns where, like, I'll get my angel creature token, or 2, depending upon what stage I am in the game, and then I'll start populating, and then my opponent will just lose, because these 4/4 flyers are really hard to beat in this format. They're not easy to overcome. There aren't a lot of cards, right? Very few at the common and uncommon slot that even can just match up with this, right? Things like Tower Gargoyle and Moroi. And even in the rare slot, there's limited numbers of Simic Sky Swallowers and things of this sort. So I feel like 4/4 is kind of the top end of flying creatures. That's what's going to beat in and kill a lot of stuff. And really happy about getting any number of them, pretty much. And whenever you miracle this, it's great. Sometimes you'll just top deck this in the late game, because I do feel this is going to be a slower format, and you'll just have 7 mana and you'll get 2 4/4 flyers and you'll be happy, right? Like I wasn't that's not far under what a Broodmate Dragon does. So this card's really great. I'm going to draft it. Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster Mage is great. There's a lot of great instants and sorceries in this format. This guy's going to have a lot of value in that. He's also just worth money. Draft him every time. First pick, always. I'm going to pick him up in any other packs as well, just because he's worth money. But great effect too, right? This guy is, I guess, maybe not a bomb sort of thing, right? Like, I don't know. But I in the same way that I guess Restoration Angel isn't technically a bomb, Blade Splicer isn't technically a bomb, this is still a guy that'll win you games. You get to buy back a really good spell. This will just win you the game, right? Late game, you'll buy back you'll be able to get back for second dipping your opportunity, and then you just win the game off of that. And then just being able to play this guy with a removal spell, right? You spend 4 mana, you kill a creature, right? You Magma Jet something even, you don't even care. Great value. Temporal Mastery, not a great card. Worth enough money for me to draft, I feel. You really want to miracle this, though. 7 mana to take an extra turn is not that great. It also gets exiled, of course, because you don't want shenaniganry. Wizards has been more careful in modern sets about avoiding shenaniganry. Exiling this is part of the non-shenaniganry clause. If you miracle this, it's okay. I don't even think it's that crazy. You time walk in this format, that can be good, but it kind of depends upon when you get to time walk. If you're just time walking like turn 3, maybe it's the same as just playing Explore, basically, right? It's not really doing a whole lot. I don't know. This card's all right. I'm mainly just going to draft it for the money. Liliana of the Veil, this card's fantastic. I mean, I don't think much needs to be explained about why Liliana of the Veil is so good. At worst case, she comes down, she makes a player sacrifice a creature. I'm willing to spend 3 mana for that effect. 3 mana to edict my opponent is probably decent. The fact that she is a planeswalker and has all sorts of upside, and if your opponent doesn't have anything to do anything against her, she just wins the game. Yeah. Obviously, you always pick this. She's worth money. You know, she wasn't. She's just so strong. But yeah, the fact she's worth money is the reason why you're never going to pass her even pack 3 when you're Bant or something, right? You're going to say, okay, yeah, you're going in my sideboard. You're just straight money. Gristlebrand, kind of the same story in that it's a money card. Less the same story in that he's not as playable. Liliana of the Veil, I'll slam in any black deck. Gristlebrand, I kind of want to get there with a Reanimator strategy. Maybe a ramp strategy, but the ramp colors like green, blue, and Sultai isn't really a thing. I don't know. This guy is the card that will make me try a Reanimator strategy with Torrent of Souls, Unburial Rites, right? Gifts Ungiven. You can win games. If you have a deck that's just like Esper, and you have an Unburial Rites, Gifts Ungiven, and Gristlebrand, if you manage to get all those pieces together, you're just going to Gifts Ungiven, and you're just going to pick 2 cards. You're going to pick Unburial Rites and Gristlebrand, and the next turn you're going to, no matter what they pick, right? You did this end of their turn. Now your turn starts. You put Gristlebrand into play. You draw 7 cards probably, right? Because why not spin the wheel once there? You just do disgusting things, win the game. It's weird that he's here because there isn't really a lot to stop that, right? When if you have a match in Limited where your opponent just keeps up 4 mana, end of your turn, Gifts Ungiven for Unburial Rites and Gristlebrand, you're just going to lose the game. There's not a whole lot that's really going to stop them from just winning. Because even when you have removal for their Gristlebrand, and there's instant speed removal in this format, so you have an answer to them, but even when you have answers for the Gristlebrand, they still just probably got to draw 7 cards off of them, and that's probably backbreaking on its own. This card, I feel, is what really makes the Reanimator strategy go from the sub-theme to something really scary that I want to draft if I can get there. I think the first step is drafting Gristlebrand, though. You'll find the Torrent of Souls, you'll find the Unburial Rites, and you'll maybe even potentially find Gifts Ungiven, although this card is worth money, so it's a little bit unlikely. But you can find the strategies for reanimating this guy at the uncommon slot, and they'll go fairly late, I think. So once you get this guy, I think that he's going to get there. But you just really need to get him like pack 1, pick 1, right? Or pretty early on. I don't think anyone's going to pass him to you, so that's why I don't think you're going to get him like pick 2 on pack 1. But if you can get him really early on and start drafting those other Reanimator cards, this guy becomes really valuable. He just becomes a lot less valuable pack 3 when you're sitting there and you maybe you're even black, but you didn't draft the Unburial Rites, you didn't draft the Torrent of Souls, and you might not get there. I don't know. I'm picking this guy up every time simply because of the money. I'm actually, if I'm pack 1 picking him though, I'm going to try and draft around him. I honestly am, because I think the effects that go with him are going to go late enough in the draft that I'm going to reliably be able to get a few of them. I think that even if I don't find Gifts Ungiven, right, I have cards like Corpse Connoisseur that I think will also go pretty late, right, which will allow me just to fetch Gristlebrand, put him in my graveyard. I'm going to have just ways of milling myself with things like Forbidden Alchemy. I feel like if you open Gristlebrand, you can make this strategy work. I'm not sure about the ramp strategy, but I'm not sure if you open Craterhoof Behemoth, you'll be able to make the ramp strategy work. But I really feel confident if you open Gristlebrand, you're going to be able to make that strategy work. There's enough support, and it's going to go late enough that you're going to be able to make this work. So, I don't know. This guy is not a pack 2 pick 1 in terms of playability. He's a pack 2 pick 1 in terms of money. He's a pack 1 pick 1 playable though. I think this is like the bomb that you take. And I guess the question is, like, what happens if you open, because of foils are a thing, what happens if I open something like Gristlebrand and a Blood Moon, right? Some other, like, money card, but, like, that's worth more than Gristlebrand? There aren't a whole lot that are worth more, but, Blood Moon might be an example. There's some interesting, good problems to have, I guess, in this format. Well, do I choose between Gristlebrand and Blood Moon? It's interesting because I Blood Moon doesn't really do anything. Gristlebrand does do something. Maybe that's enough. I don't know. I feel like Gristlebrand will win me games, and I might actually pick Gristlebrand, even though he's worth like $10 less than Blood Moon. I might actually pick him over Blood Moon. I'm not sure if that's correct. I'll have to think about it, but I think this guy's playable. If you draft the deck around him, you play him. I think there's enough Reanimator effects that even though he costs 8 and you're probably not going to get there, even though this is a slow format, I like this guy a lot. Past in Flames I don't like. I don't really see how this card is supposed to work. 4 mana to give my instant sorcery cards on my graveyard flashback. How much mana do I have left over to cast stuff, though, right? Like, am I playing Past in Flames just so I can flashback a Magma Jet, right? Or like a Mizium Mortars or something? I mean, like, what am I doing here with this stuff? I don't know. I flashback a Dragon Fodder. I spent 6 mana to cast Dragon Fodder, and then I can flashback cast like another Dragon Fodder. This card is not good in this limited environment, and the only reason you draft it is because it's worth money. This is a little bit of a test. I don't know, like, because it's not worth that much money online. It's still worth a decent chunk. It's like 6 ticks, 7 ticks, something around there, I think. But this card just isn't good. It doesn't do anything. I don't know. It's like a mini version of Blood Moon. I imagine it like that. I just think it's about as useless. I really don't plan on using this very often, just because you don't have rituals in this format, right? Nothing is really getting you mana. It's not like when you cast this, you're able to start casting a bunch of rituals and get the way to cast the rest of your graveyard. There's no storm thing going on here. I don't know. I don't like this card. Bonfire of the Damned. I like this card. I like it as a way of sort of splashing it in any deck that's looking for removal. I like it just as sort of a way to be aggressive and have reach when I'm just the base red deck. I like this a lot. It's worth money too. Not a whole lot, but it's worth some. And I'm going to take this. I think it's splashable. And I think in particular because the other colors offer you good scry effects too. Things like Serum Visions. It offers you ways to draw cards on your opponent's turn, right? Which is nice. So you have maybe some way of getting extra with this. I don't know. It's tricky because if you don't get it for the miracle effect, it's not really as strong. You spend 5 mana and you deal 2 damage to all your opponent's creatures. I'm still kind of willing to pay 5 mana for that effect, though. I don't know. You really want to miracle it, but when you do miracle it, it's a blowout. And even when you miracle it, early on, maybe it kills a creature, right? You spend 3 mana on this. It kills 1 or 2 of their creatures, a token or 2 or something like this. And it does some damage to their face, and that's good enough, right? You play this as like a slightly overcosted Searing Blaze. I like this card. I think I'm going to try and make it work in a decent number of decks. It's not something that's really going to force me to play red, right? If I'm looking, I'm just not finding the other pieces of red. I might have spec'd on this and said, okay, well maybe if red is open, I can splash this. I can get there. If that just doesn't work out, I'm fine putting this in my sideboard. It's not like something I have to have in my deck. But I think the effect is good enough that in combination with the fact it's worth money, it's going to get me there drafting this a lot of time. Tarmogoyf, it's not super impressive in Limited. I think a lot of people already know this, even though we do have fetch lands, but you're not going to see a lot of fetch lands. It's hard to get a bunch of stuff in the graveyard. That said, it's worth money, so I'm going to draft it every time. Like Liliana of the Veil, but a little bit less playable than Liliana of the Veil, but still even playable. I mean, if this guy's just a 2/3 for 2 mana, that's fine. I think he'll get there a good enough chunk of the time, right, that I'll be happy with him. And sometimes he'll have even more upside. Becomes a 3/4, a 4/5. I mean, there are instant sorceries, enchantments. Maybe if I have this in my deck, I'm more willing to draft something like, or play something like Ancient Grudge in the main, or Sundering Growth, right? Some way of just putting an artifact or enchantment in the yard. I don't know. But either way, I'm just drafting this because he's worth money. Greater Behemoth. works in Reanimator, but he's not really the Reanimator colors, which are essentially Mardu between Torn of Souls and Unburial Rites. Really more Orzhov, because you don't need the red part of Torn of Souls necessarily to reanimate stuff. And that's kind of awkward because green isn't the color between Orzhov, right? Esper is that combination, but this guy also works in the ramp strategy. I think this is the card I'm gonna like. If I find this, I'm gonna try and make the summoning trap, primal command type stuff work. I'm gonna be drafting the Avacyn's Pilgrims really highly. I'm gonna be drafting Sylvan Rangers. I'm gonna be drafting Signets. I'm gonna play like a big green deck. But I have to find something like this because again, I just don't think there's, unlike, I'm not even sure that like I get there with after I've done that, right? After I've gotten all these ramp souls, because 8 mana is still a lot. And I don't know. It's tricky. I just don't think... I think he wins me the game a lot of the same way as Gristlebrand does, but just the color combination is more difficult to pull off. And I'm not sure maybe what I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to be drafting this for the Reanimator strategy as well, right? That I'm supposed to be drafting Crater Hoof Behemoth and then just ignoring the fact that I have a Crater Hoof Behemoth and instead be focusing on just getting the reanimation spells. And the ramp strategy is more of a trap when I open this guy. I don't know. It's kind of interesting, though, that I have this thought that the ramp strategy seems less reliable compared to the Reanimator strategy that I'd actually consider, even though this guy is green, just avoiding the green cards that are meant to support him and just instead preferring the black cards that can get him out of my graveyard, right? I find this guy with Corpse Connoisseur, and then I bring him back with Torn of Souls, and I say GG, right? Maybe that's what happens. Sphinx's Revelation. Instant speed spell, that's fantastic. I mean, this card was really great. I'm a little bit less big on it in limited. I don't know. It's still really good though, and it's worth money. And I really like blue in this format, so I'm gonna like Sphinx's Revelation. I could be blue black, instant speed control, and I'll splash a little white for this. I could just be blue white blink, and this could just be a good value card, right? I spend 6 mana. At instant speed, gain X life, gain 3 life, draw 3 cards with a little bit more upside when I'm casting it for more, right? It's like, it can beat opportunity in a sense. But at instant speed, the card draw I think is going to be very valuable. I mean, opportunity obviously is instant speed as well, but I like it at instant speed. I think it fits really well into a lot of the archetypes because of this. It's not necessarily just, I have to be like blue-white. Right, I can be Esper, I could just be blue-black splashing a little bit white because I could play this pretty late in the game. I don't know, I think this card is good. I'm gonna first draft it a lot of the times because of the combination of the money worth and the potential of the card. Olivia Voldaren, this card's amazing. This card's modern playable sometimes. I mean, Dies to Lightning Bolt is the big disadvantage, but I've seen this card in modern a few times back in the day, so that's sort of giving you a rough idea of the power level. She's a pinger, which is great. Again, I love Vithian Stinger. She costs 4 mana. That's great. I love 4 mana cards. And this extra text basically just says you win the game if they can't kill her. So, pretty good. I mean, yeah, even if she didn't have the, even if we just ignore this other ability, which is just broken in limited, she's a pinger and a 4/4. She's a 4 mana 3/3 flyer. Yeah, pretty good. But if you read the text here, Olivia Voldaren deals 1 damage to another target creature. That creature becomes a vampire. In addition to its other types, put a +1/+1 counter on Olivia Voldaren. Yeah, so she grows and she pings. And then, oh, what's this? 5 mana, gain control of target vampire for as long as you control Olivia. Oh, okay, yeah. Just mind control all of my opponent's creatures. Seems pretty good. The disadvantage, of course, I guess, is that you ping a lot of your opponent's creatures, you take them over, you spend a lot of mana on that, and then they have an answer to Olivia. But if they don't have an answer to Olivia, or you have ways of protecting her, that's really good. I guess one of the problems is that if she gets Flicker Wisped, you lose control of Olivia because she leaves the battlefield, right? I'm pretty sure that's the interaction. She gets blinked, and you lose control of all your guys. But still, this card is, your opponent has to have an answer. If they don't have an answer, they just lose the game, right? This is the you don't have an answer, you lose the game card. And I like cards like that because, I mean, it's limited. Sometimes they just don't have an answer, and you win the game. I'll take that. Even if I didn't use any of her other stuff, even if I only used her ping ability to kill things like little 1/1s, and just used her as a 4/4 flyer that I could buff, right? I'm fine with that, right? I mean, the fact that maybe they can get their guys back if they blink her is fine, right? I lose the +1/+1 counters on her, which kind of sucks. Like, a bunch of my mana was undone, but yeah, I'll accept those failure modes, which aren't even really failure modes because I still get to keep her, I guess. I don't know. Great card, fantastic. I'm gonna first pick her. She isn't worth money, but I'm still gonna first pick her, and I'm gonna play black red. I'm gonna win with Olivia a lot of the time. Domri Raid. This guy isn't that bad, especially with a lot of what you're trying to do with green red. I mean, I think one of the problems again is you can get into these situations where you're kind of gummed up on the ground and you need a way to get over the top. This guy will get you over the top, one with card advantage, because he will just, if you have a very creature heavy deck, he's going to get you a lot of creatures, right? His +1 is look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. There's also some scry effects, right? You have things like Magma Jet at red, so it's not like it's that crazy that you have some control of the top of your deck to really make use of this. His -2 is Prey Upon, right? Target creature you control fights another creature. And then, of course, his ultimate gives you an emblem. Creatures you control have double strike, trample, hexproof, and haste. Yeah, that's probably pretty good for the go wide strategy. Not bad. So, 3 mana Planeswalker, I like a lot. This guy, like Olivia Voldaren will make me play black-red. This guy will make me play green-red. I kind of know what I have to do with my deck for the rest of that. I want to draft a bunch of creatures. I'm going to find a lot of creatures. I'm going to find my Burning Tree emissaries, my Mog Flunkies, and whatnot. I'm going to try and find like a Gaea's Anthem, and I'm just going to use this guy as my way of beating all the decks that are trying to grind me out, right? Oh, I got stalled on the board. You had some way of halting my attack. Well, that's fine. I'm just sitting back with a Domri Raid. You do whatever you want to do, but I'm just going to keep on keeping on and win the game eventually. And this guy's nuts. So I'm gonna draft him very highly. He isn't worth money, but I'm gonna pick him very early on because I think he's good enough for me to go into 2 colors early on. Voice of Resurgence, another nutty card. Again, if I'm playing green-white, I want tokens. This guy is crazy with tokens. A token that says this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control is exactly the sort of token I'm looking for, because my deck is going to just try and make a bunch of creatures. A lot of them are going to be tokens, and if a lot of them are tokens of this token, right, copies of this token, that's going to be amazing. Yeah, this guy's nuts. Draft him really highly. He's also worth a ton of money, so you're going to pick him up regardless, but whatever. Cavern of Souls. There are some tribal things going on here, but you notice there aren't a lot of big ones, right? There's some human stuff going on. There's some goblin stuff going on. There's some demon stuff going on. There's some angels going on. This stuff is happening, but I don't really, like, not a lot of my spells are going to get countered ultimately. There are some counters, right? Specifically Soul Manipulation is one of the ones that I don't want to get hit by. Familiar's Ruse, potentially, other stuff, but like Vensers and whatnot. But the main reason you're going to draft this card is because it's worth money. I mean, let's be quite honest. It's worth a good chunk of change. This is one of the cards that's going to help you pay back your draft pretty easily. And there's enough of a tribal thing going on here that I think it's, like, even when I'm not really trying for it, this card is going to be decent mana fixing, right? It'll be colorless sometimes when I'm trying to do some stuff, but for a lot of my creatures, right, even if I just have like one creature in my hand and I don't have the mana to cast it, I have my other colors, but I don't have that, I'm just going to play Cavern of Souls for that one creature. It could be the only of that type of... I could only have like one beast in my deck, but I'll be sitting there on like turn 5 and say, I really want to cast my Thragtusk, right? Or like turn 2, I'll be like, I'd like to get my Ooze on the board. And I'll cast Scavenging Ooze, right? Just as a bear, just to get him out of my hand. And if I have my other colors, right, then I'm probably going to be fine. I'm fine with this card. I'm drafting it because it's worth money. I'm probably going to put it in my deck when I draft it, though. I think the use of it is enough, right? And just, I don't even have to draft around it to make it useful. That's not something you want to be doing, but I'm going to find that use often enough that I'm going to put this in my deck. So that's just all I want to say. I'm picking this up because of the money. I'm putting it in my deck regardless. So that's all the rares and mythics. The general story being that some of them are just worth money, and that's the only reason you draft them. The Stony Silences, the Blood Moons, Pyromancer Ascensions, if you're drafting in paper mainly. Things of that sort, Cavern of Souls. A lot of them are just really great bombs, though. Really, really strong effects, really strong whatever. And some of them are worth money, too, like the Blade Splicers and Restoration Angels are really amazing and worth money. Some of them are like Seance. I think Seance is a really solid card, and I'll pick that up. Or like Deadeye Navigator, right? They aren't really worth money, but I think the effects are really good. Generally speaking, these rares are all solid. Same with the Mythics, right? And the rares that aren't solid, you're going to pick up anyways because they're worth money. So the question really becomes, you know, when you see a pack where the rare has been taken or the foil has been taken, you don't really get a lot of information. I want to go back to signaling here for a second. When you see a pack that gets past you, and this is like pick 2, and the rare is missing or the mythic's missing, you really don't have very much information at all. You don't have really any idea. It doesn't matter what the quality of uncommon is because, let's face it, no matter what the uncommon is, they're always going to take a Liliana of the Veil. No matter what the uncommon is, right, they're always going to take a Damnation, a Blood Moon, right? They're going to take a fetch land. They're going to take a fetch land over whatever that uncommon is. It could be the best uncommon, their favorite uncommon. They don't care, right? Grab a fetch land. You know, I would grab a Marsh Flats over all that. That's how low I would go. Marsh Flats is maybe my line, right? Where like $4 or $5 is what I would take over any uncommon in the set. But the real question with signaling, I think, starts coming down to, well, what happens when the rare is still in the set? What happens if Stony Silence is still in the set or still in the pack, right? If you get past a pack and it's still a Stony Silence, what do you conclude from that, right? Like, what uncommons are worth more than a couple bucks, right? What if you get past the pack and especially you see something like a Marsh Flats, what are you supposed to read into that? So I've kind of made a list of the best commons and uncommons, and I have it sorted by color right now. And I want to go over a little bit about this because this will help sort of recap everything that I said in the other videos, which might be valuable for people. But also kind of give you an idea of what is likely to be missing from the pack if an uncommon is gone, or what might be missing from the pack if a common is gone, right? These are going to be your really big signals that you get sent early on because, again, as I said, signaling I feel is very important. You want to find the right archetype. You want to find the open archetype. You want to draft all the synergies for that. This is going to be a format where drafting synergies is going to be really important, but you're also going to be in a format where people are going to pick money early on. So when you can get signals, you want to read those signals correctly. I think it's going to be very valuable, and a lot of that is going to come down to when there wasn't a money card in the pack screwing up the signals. When they took an uncommon or a common, you want to know what's the likelihood that was, what color did they go into, right? What archetype are they in? And so here's sort of a recap. I guess this isn't quite all of them. There are a few that I've noticed are missing from the list, but this is my sort of top commons and uncommons. So first off, for the uncommons, one of the things you'll note, white has a lot of great uncommons. Path to Exile, I think Intangible Virtue is a very highly pickable thing because the token synergy is so there that it doesn't take much to, like, it's easy to draft around this card. You're not really speccing too hard when you take this card. Lingering Souls is fantastic. Flicker Wisp is fantastic. Master Splicer is fantastic. I would count Banishing Stroke just because removal is a little bit weaker in white and you want to grab what you can. So a lot of really great white cards, and then a little bit less of the other colors, right? In blue, I'm seeing things like good card draw spells, Compulsive Research Opportunity. The Splicer is there. I think the Splicer is really good. In black, I'm seeing some good removal in creatures, Seal of Doom, Vampire Nighthawk, and Entomber Exarch. I take those. Red, Pyroclasm, Vithian Stinger, things of the sort. Green has some decent numbers, right? Gaea's Anthem is probably something like Intangible Virtue I'm willing to spec on. Vital Splicer, great. Harmonize. I like Arachnus Spinner personally. I'm not sure other people will be drafting this as highly. I think Baloth Cage Trap is good, as I talked about in the green-white video. I like it even if I'm just paying 5 to get a 4/4, right? Because I want to populate this token a bunch. If I can get the upside, right, where they put a Splicer into play and then I get to cast this, or they put a Signet into play and I get to cast this, right? That's even better. But I think these cards are reasonably first pickable. So green has some as well. And then a lot of the other cards are signets where you're going to have a decent idea of what the power level of those are and whether or not that's like better than the rare that you see, right? And if the rare is like really bad or something, then maybe they just took a signet. It's possible. There aren't a lot of rares that I would count that for, but right, certainly I would take a Stony Silence over a signet, right? Signets are great, and I've talked a lot about signets, but I would take $2 over just a random signet, I think. But a lot of the other cards are multicolored, and they're kind of hard to first pick, I guess. And it's kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure how to read that. Some people, as part of their draft strategies, are willing to take multicolored cards really early, and I think maybe you've gotten the impression in these videos I'm not, because I'm not. So I've kind of shied away from saying that I would first pick some of these cards. But I kind of imagine that some people out there are going to be picking these multicolored cards. They'll grab the Terminates, they'll grab the Soul Ransoms. Maybe they'll even kind of, I think, fall into the trap of drafting early on some of these enemy colored cards, right? Like maybe they'll think Sin Collector is really good. Maybe they'll really like Putrefy, right? Putrefy is really solid, but like that really puts you into a given shard from Alara, right? You're stuck there in those three colors because there isn't really support for these enemy guild colors. So I think the main lesson, the first thing you should be thinking about if you see a card like Stony Silence go to you is that they probably took a really good white uncommon. That's my first guess. Second guess is maybe they took some green. And the other thing is that they're probably taking like multicolored cards, and they're really speculative. And so like it's kind of weird that my three options are they're white, they're green, or they're open to whatever, right? And they're just drafting a bunch of stuff early on, and they're not going to settle into a color for later. But all those things are pretty, important things. And what's important is you'll get back up on your understanding later, right? You'll start to understand more about what they're drafting as things go on. When you see that an uncommon was taken out of the pack, right? And you also start seeing, you see another good green card go, right? You see a good green uncommon go past. You say, okay, well, they're not green. You rule that out, right? You see a good multicolored card go past, and you say, okay, well, they're not one of these guys that really values the multicolored stuff highly, and they don't care about keeping themselves open. They're willing to spec on their early stuff a lot harder. That starts saying, okay, they probably drafted a white card. So when you see that first pack go by where the uncommon was taken out, that narrows it down in an important way where they probably took one of those things, right? And so you can really start focusing down off of those first few picks when one of the first picks that they took out was an uncommon, because there's sort of three really big things that it could be. And that's one of the big takeaways I want to have from this video is that the signaling is really important. You want to pay attention to it, and it's really critical that when you're given the ability to read your opponent in this draft format, you want to take it, because I think it's important. And so many of the rest of the signals are going to be destroyed by having these money cards in the format that people are going to be drafting all the time, right? I'm going to always draft Liliana the Veil, right? Doesn't matter, right? You if you pass it to me like pack 2, you're crazy, right? If you pass it to me pick 2 and pack 1, you're crazy, right? Always grab this card. And that sort of stuff is going to make people kind of confused, because pack 2, I got past these really great things, right? Oh, I thought he was going to be in these colors, but he wasn't. Yep, well, maybe he just took a Liliana, and then right after that, he's going to go back to drafting those colors, and you can't read too much into it. But when you see an uncommon go, or a common even, and I'll get to that in a little bit as well, I think you really want to read into it and really hone down what your opponents are going after. For the commons, some of these are a little bit weaker, and these are really more signals for when you see them past you pick 6, things of this sort, and you start going, okay, this is open, right? I don't really want to first pick a Falconwrath Noble. I might if the pack is weak, but if I see him going 6th, 7th, 8th in a draft, that really tells me that this sacrifice strategy is open, because this guy's pretty clutch to that strategy, right? This is a card I'm going to want to have. It probably have in multiples when I'm that strategy, because this drain effect, the sort of blood artist effect, is going to be really important, I think, to making that work. Likewise, I think Augur of Bolus, right? If I see this guy going late, I'm going to say to myself, okay, the blue-black control strategy is not being drafted, because I'm going to pick this guy up a lot more early in that. Core Skyfisher maybe tells me that white is open. I'm not sure people are going to value this as highly. Core Hookmaster, kind of same story, although I actually value maybe Core Skyfisher a little bit more than Core Hookmaster, because Hookmaster puts me specifically into an aggressive strategy, I feel. Anyways, I start seeing this go late. I start seeing Ogre Jailbreakers, Mog Flunkies, Sylvan Rangers maybe, right? That stuff going late is going to be important signals to me as to what colors are not being drafted, what archetypes are not being drafted. And if I see a pack where like the common is gone at the start, well, it's a little bit less as it was in uncommon, where it's probably a white card, it's probably a green card, or it's one of these like multicolor cards, and they're the type of guy who wants to draft multicolor cards early. There aren't there are fewer first pickable commons, of course, just because you usually have less power at the common slot, but also they're more spread out, I guess is what I want to say, right? If some guy takes a common out of the pack, maybe he took Gideon's Lawkeeper, maybe he took Mistraven, maybe he took Magma Jet, maybe he took Avacyn's Pilgrim, Penumbra Spider, right? It's kind of hard to read into that because the colors are all over the place, right? People are going to have no problem first picking like a Grizzly Spectacle in a pack that isn't terribly strong. There are going to be some rares that just people are not going to be that interested in. And again, some things like Stony Silence. Some people are just going to say, well, I'd rather have a Grizzly Spectacle over a Stony Silence, right? It isn't enough money to really draw me off of that. When the common is gone, you have less information than when the uncommon is gone, just because the good uncommons, I feel, are kind of clustered in green and white and the multicolored stuff, and you'll get more of an idea with future picks. With this stuff, it's trickier, right? Because they're spread out. I would happily first pick a Gideon's Lawkeeper or a Mistraven or a Penumbra Spider. And I might, depending upon like kind of what my mood is in terms of forcing an archetype, if I really like an archetype, I think Agony Warp, Burning Tree Emissary, and Call of the Conclave are just some of the best things you can be doing in these color pairs, right? These are really solid. These are going to form the bread and butter of your blue-black control, instant control archetype, your green-red go wide, your white-green populate, right? There are some really, really strong dual-colored commons, and I don't know. It's possible that even these are getting first picked by the guys who kind of like these multicolored things, or even by people who just kind of say, I really like this archetype and I just want to force this every time. You'll see people like that, and because those cards I think are so core to those archetypes, so important to them, they might be going really early. So I don't know. I guess what I want to say is that for signaling, the biggest tip I have is pay attention to when an uncommon is gone from your pack, from the second pick of pack one, right? That's going to be a really big signal. I feel you're going to be able to pick up and narrow down pretty hard what your opponent's on, or what the guy to your side is doing. When that happens, when a rare is gone or a mythic is gone, you're not going to have that much information to go off of. And there's also some kind of interesting side things. What happens when an uncommon is gone, but there are other good uncommons in the pack, right? That probably for me just narrows it down even more. I guess it depends a little bit because it depends on your ranking of, like, say, Master Splicer versus Flicker Wisp. If both of those are in the pack, which one does the guy take? If my answer is, say, oh, I'd take the Master Splicer, and the other guy's answer is Flicker Wisp, and it's hard to say, right? Maybe when you see the other one in the pack, you say, oh, he wouldn't have valued the other one that highly. Clearly, this color is open. I don't know if you read that, but I guess, I don't know. At the same time, if I see a really solid uncommon of another color in the pack, right, that I get past, I'm more often going to read that color is open, because I'm also kind of expecting my draft opponent, I guess. I don't know what to call the guy on your right, basically, but I'm kind of expecting them to not want to do that to some extent, right? That they don't want to send me that really bad signal, because they know it'll be a really, really bad signal. I'm not sure. In my case, I would actually value Master Splicer over Flicker Wisp, I think, just because this guy's more splashable. And this costs 2 white. So, but I could see other people thinking it's the other way around, and I could agree with them in some cases. I don't know. But in any case, be very wary of the signaling. I spent too long talking about this, but in the common slot, there's a lot of stuff across the colors, and it's going to be a little bit tricky. You are going to be able to kind of read some stuff into that, I feel, but it's going to have to be over the course of a number of picks, right? At the uncommon slot, it narrows it down a little bit further when the uncommon is missing. It's probably white-green or a guy who really values multicolored. If you see really solid anything of those colors passing a little bit later, then you kind of have a pretty good idea. Oh, it must have been one of those, right? And really get that signaling in whenever you can. So that's sort of everything about this set. I've gone over all the commons, uncommons, and rares at this point. I skimmed over a few of them a little bit, I suppose. Didn't really explain them to their fullest. I might go back and do some other videos where I talk about specific archetypes in greater depth. I kind of focused on red-based strategies and then green-white and blue-black to kind of capture all of this stuff. I'm also really very, very interested in blue-white as an archetype, so that might be the video that if I do another video on this, I do next before I just start doing draft videos, essentially. I suppose everything that I want to emphasize about the card values, though, has more or less been said, right? And if it wasn't clear, this is a pretty good list of top commons, I would say, in this set. This is red, by the way, even though Moto seems to mess this up. And I think the emphasis is, I think white and blue are really solid colors. I think they're white in particular is a little bit short on removal. So things like Pitfall Trap move up in value. That's sort of a large summary of that. A lot of the good white cards that are going to put you into white are at the uncommon slot. So that's really how I'm going to get into white a lot of the time is through drafting, just first picking a really solid white uncommon. Blue is probably my favorite color in the set. I think it's really solid. I think this is a slower set, and I think that blue is really well positioned to get advantage in these longer, grindier games. It has enough tools to set up those longer, grindier games with defensive creatures like Augur of Bolas, Seagate Oracle, tempo effects like Mist Raven, walls like Wall of Frost, right, or Wall of Denial. I don't really like the base red strategies. I really like red as a support color, though. Cards like Magma Jet, Chandra's Outrage, Thunderous Wrath, Pyroclasm, Is It Charm, things that are uncommon, right? Really make it a very good support color. I probably don't want to be drafting the Mog Flunkies deck because I think that drafting Signets is going to be one of the most important things, and just skipping over this 2-drop slot in favor of playing things like Penumbra Spider, right? Which I think just stops a lot of these Mog Flunky strategies in their tracks. I like that a lot. But you can make a base red deck, and I think you need to be just aggressive then because there isn't a lot of ways to get card advantage in red whenever that happens. In black, I kind of prefer a blue-black strategy splashing red, which is more control-based rather than these sacrifice strategies. I don't really think the Falcon Wrath Noble type strategies are going to get there, and that's part of the cards that I glossed over. Interestingly, black is a little bit of a Reanimator sub-theme going on with Torrent of Souls and Unburial Rites. Green is a little bit of a ramp strategy going on, which is kind of useful in and of itself. The Avacyn's Pilgrims and the Sylvan Rangers and the Explorers and things of that sort are also pretty just solid cards that kind of make up for maybe you not getting the signets. You could still draft a strategy that really focused on 4-drop slot type stuff without getting the signets. Overall, I really, really like all 4-drops because I think signets are a really big deal, and I'm repeating myself at this point, but Penumbra Spider is one of the best ones. There are some really solid multicolored commons, and I think these are going to form the core a lot of the time of your deck in that archetype, right? Blue-black wants as many Agony Warps as it can get, basically. This card is just a really solid removal spell for them. Burning Tree Emissary is really big into this green-red go-wide strategy. Call of the Conclave gives you a token to populate, which, I want to emphasize. If you're in this populate strategy, I think you want to get the token makers first. You can also get some stuff thrown in like Ground Assault, just good removal if you're sort of to shore up your archetypes. Stuff like that. Really good uncommons in this set. A lot of them really strong. I have a large list here. Again, I put a special emphasis on the signets. I think that having your mana fixing will pay off with cards like Sprouting Thrynax, Sidrax's Spectre, Tower Gargoyle, Thokdar, Rock's Warmonk, right? There are these tricolor cards at uncommon that are all very solid, and you're going to be fine even just you play a signet just to get the mana fixing, and then you play this guy, even if it's a 3-drop, you play him on turn 3 with the signet. You just kind of leave a mana open. That's fine. I like a lot of these cards that I've listed here. I think they're all really strong. I would draft them fairly highly. Vithian Stinger is a really big one. Any of these white uncommons are really solid. I love Compulsive Research. This card is usually just 3 mana, draw 3, because you don't care about having the land in your hand. Yada, yada, yada. Again, I put a special emphasis on having 4-drops. I want to ramp into 4-drops, and so especially things like Vital Splicer Wing Splicer, Moroi, Gore Clan Rampager, maybe Bronzebeak Moa. A lot of this stuff that like puts a creature on the battlefield so I can start beating in. I can start defending myself against an aggressive strategy. Those I'm going to value very highly over, you know, things that are kind of 4-drops but kind of not really, right? What's a good example? I don't think I've listed any of them here because I don't value them as highly, but a lot of the sort of the cheaper kind of bad removal spells, right? My Aether Toes, right? Things of that sort, or my Grasp of Phantoms. I'm going to value less than just having a 4-drop to play, like a Mist Raven there. But they can still also be pretty good. In any case, let me just wrap up. This video has gone very long, and all my videos have gone pretty long, but I guess if you're interested in sort of a more in-depth thing of the sort, if this is just a video you can watch in the background, or, you know, for my case, when I'm just sort of, for posterity's sake, trying to sum up my thoughts on the format before I start drafting it. The longness of the videos is not as big a disadvantage in that case. But just to sum up, signets are great. I don't think aggressive strategies are great. I think you should be focusing more on being base blue, less on being base red. Signaling is very difficult in this format because of the presence of the money rares, but there are some pretty powerful signals that can come when the uncommon is missing from a pack that I think you need to pick up on. Drafting synergies is going to be very important in this format. You want to be doing what your archetype is kind of built to do. And I think if you follow those and just sort of have a general good assessment of the value of cards, should be a very fun draft format to play. Slower, more grindy, but in a way that I like, actually. So I'm willing to put up with it. Draft fixing highly. Not sure what else to say. I think I'm just going to sign off now. Lots of great removal in this format. All sorts of things to be said. Rewatch the videos if you're terribly interested. And that's it. So thank you very much. And I think the next videos, if I don't do a video kind of looking over some of the other archetypes, going into like a deeper dive of what specifically I would want to see in like blue-white and how I would value cards of that sort, right? What cards I would value less, knowing that I'm going into that archetype, which cards I would value more, etc. If I don't do a video like that, then probably the next videos you're going to see on here in regards to Modern Masters are going to be draft videos. The format that I'm planning on doing is basically just do the draft, and then I think going to do replays of the draft games. It can kind of be boring if there's a lot of dead time where I'm just, you know, you're sitting there watching me think about what I want to do, or we're just sitting there waiting for the opponent to act. A replay lets me kind of pause and talk about whatever I want to talk about for as much time as I want to talk about, and then speed through the stuff when I've not much to talk about. So I think the format is going to be show the draft video sort of kind of live-ish, right? I mean, effectively, like just you'll see me draft in real time in the video. And then for the games themselves, just sort of quicker recaps, how the deck did, and then a summary video. Okay, so here's what we did in the draft. Here's sort of the choices we made. And here's how it felt in the games. Was the strategy good or bad? Lessons learned, etc., etc., etc. That'll be sort of the general format going forward now that these review videos are mostly or completely done. Anyways, thank you very much, and have a nice day.